Good evening, I'm DK Roster, and welcome to Race to 21 right here on TTT, Talk City 91.1 FM, and the TTT Live online. Throughout the night, we will be bringing you the latest updates and results from the various party headquarters, as well as detailed analysis of the developments as they unfold from members of our in-studio panel. Our team at TTT has you covered. Our crews are stationed at all the key locations, and we'll start checking in with them right now. We first go to Balize House, where Sunil Lala is standing by. Sunil?
Yeah. Welcome back. This is Balize House. We're coming to you live from Balize House here, and it is election night here. What you see here is our official setup for the night, and we will be bringing you the latest updates. As for now, it's not much going on so far. The final touches are being made just to the left of me, or just east of Balize House, just in front of it, along Tranquility Lane. The entire has actually been cordoned off, and the stage has been set where the leader of the People's National Movement, or the Prime Minister at the current time, Stuart Young, will give his concession speech or his winning speech. There is a lot of media set up on this side where we are. Just a few supporters trickling in at this point in time. Of course, the polls would have closed just about an hour and a half ago. So not much happening at this point in time at Balize House. We do have the final touches, as I said, taking place. So you can still hear some scaffolding being transported along here. There's a lot of flags and not a lot of fanfare as well. But we will catch you up with some interviews in the coming time. Back to you, DK.
Thank you very much, Sunil. And it'll also be remiss of me not to say that live coverage is also being broadcast on Caribbean Showtime TV in Canada and Win TV in New York. So we are getting ready to speak with many of our journalists who are in the field. One of those I know will be Ayana Carter. Even before we go to Ayana, though, we want to introduce some of the panelists who will be spending the night with us, as it were. We start off with Dr. Mukesh Basdeo, a lecturer in political science in the Department of Political Science, and he is also one of the individuals who would have co-created the Constitutional Affairs and Parliamentary Studies Unit, Department of Behavioral Sciences, as well as currently serving as his deputy coordinator. We have someone else in studio who is very happy to say that he can class himself as a retiree. He was formerly a director and oil and gas finance consultant at Heritage Petroleum. Antonio Rossi brings experience from previous roles at Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited, Sunbeam Capital Investment, and Halliburton. And last but not least, at this point in time on the set with us, we have Dr. Jamelia Harris. She's an economist and researcher previously based at the University of Warwick in the United Kingdom. Her research centers on labor markets in developing countries and how labor can better feed into economic development. She has advised governments on their economic development policy in several countries in Africa, including Ethiopia, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. She's a double President's Medal winner and national scholar. Very happy to be talking to some bright people this evening as we go through what is the general election, the 2025 Race to 21. Now, we're also happy to say that we will be speaking with someone who has the responsibility of letting us know the numbers as they come in. And that person is none other than Sigoni Mohammed. So, Sigoni, we're saying good evening to you. And what are some of the things that we'll be expecting from you this evening? So I guess even before we do that, I think we can start with the conversation. Thank you very much for being here, Dr. Basdeo, Mr. Ross, Dr. Harris. And I think I want to start off with a bit of a round robin in terms of 6 weeks, intense. What are some of the things that really stood out to you on the campaign trail, as it were? I'll start with you, please, Dr. Basdale.
Well, I think one of the most interesting development that actually took place started in the month of January. And that was when the then Prime Minister, Dr. Rabi, announced that he's going to have a retreat in Tobago. And coming out of that retreat, we learned about the decision to hand over power, and that there was a straw vote that was taken. And after that, things started to roll in this context. Like what we could say, like a snowball effect, if we were to take it in this context, but where we are today on the 28th of April. So a lot of things happened very fast, and we had the resignation, the appointment of the new Prime Minister, Mr. Young, and then 24 hours later, the dissolution of Parliament and the setting the date of the general election, which was set within the minimum time frame, which was 5 weeks, set by the Representation of the People's Act. So everything took place in a period of, let's say, between the dissolution of Parliament and the appointment of the new Prime Minister was 20. If we look at it, 24 hours actually happened in this context. So here we are today, now having to discuss now the results of today's general election.
How was it similar or different for you, Dr. Harris?
To me, the thing that stood out most is the conversation. So I've recently moved back to Trinidad and Tobago. So I was interested in the conversation and the level of discourse, I guess I would say. Because having returned after being abroad for 15 years, I was a bit surprised that we are still talking about the same issues, which I find really telling, because we're still talking about economy and diversification. We're still talking about the cost of living. We're still talking about crime. So it seems as though we haven't pushed the discourse in terms of what concerns the voter. That hasn't moved as far as one would have hoped.
When you rock back from your perch, Mr. Ross.
Well, good evening to everyone on the panel. Good evening, Trinidad and Tobago. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to look at it from the perspective of when we had the first rally, because I'm in the PNM. Let me put that out there. And from the first rally in Woodford Square, some people were commenting that it didn't appear that it was as much excitement as in years gone by. But as that campaign developed, culminating in Etihad grounds on the weekend, you can see how the excitement grew and how it snowballed into a fantastic campaign. One of the dangers of that is when you're looking at the campaign, when you're in it, you sort of become your own echo chamber and you feel that you're sure you're going to win. But at the end of the day, like I've said to many of my friends, consider it like this. You go to school for 5 years and you have an exam to write. And they send you home to prepare for the exam, which is that 6-week period. And you're cramming and or studying as the case may be. And then you've got that exam, which was today, and that exam ended at 6 p.m. today. And now you're going to wait for the results. At the end of the day, the results will speak to the work that you had put in that 6-week period and in the 5 years prior to that 6-week period. So that is going to be a very telling results that we're going to have today. And of course, being from the party that I'm from, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to pull off a victory today.
But don't vex with me if I say right now we're going central. Because
that's all right.
Because Ayana Carter is at Trinity Road. And we are looking to hear what is happening from the headquarters of the United National Congress. Ayana?
Suttran Road. Good evening, Trinidad and Tobago. We are here at the UNC headquarters on Mulchan Suttran Road in Chaguanas. And we are seeing a lot more persons trickling in to the headquarters. A lot of them are on the periphery. All right, they're not ready to come inside the compound just yet. Things are being set up inside. You know, the team is getting ready to make those first marks on the board, you know, telling us about the constituencies and their numbers so far. Right now, we don't have anything right now to report in terms of that. But of course, we'll have a lot more for you coming up as we're here throughout the night. So Keep it locked right here. Back to you in studio.
Thank you very much, Ayana, and we look forward to more sights, sounds, and insight. Crunching the numbers for us tonight, though, is Sigoni Mohammed. Good evening, Sigoni. What can we expect from you over the next few hours?
Good evening, DK. Welcome to our Election Results Center. This is where we'll be bringing you the latest updates as the votes are counted. Now, today marks a significant milestone, as you and everyone knows, in Trinidad and Tobago's democratic journey, being the 15th general election since our independence and the 23rd national election overall. As you heard from Ayana and Sunil, we do not have results coming in just yet, but here's some figures we think you should know. According to the EBC, there were around 1.1 million eligible voters who participated across 2,316 polling stations today, with special voting for 16,748 individuals, which wrapped up over the weekend. Now, the People's National Movement, seeking a historic third consecutive mandate after victories in the 2015 and 2020 elections, is led by political leader Dr. Keith Rowley, along with PNM Chairman and current Prime Minister Stuart Young. On the other side, the United National Congress is eager to reclaim power following their win in 2010. This election also marks a debut for several new contenders. So we'll be right here throughout the evening, delivering the latest results as they come in. And I must advise, as always, to our viewers and our listeners, the figures we will be presenting are preliminary results. The official results will be announced in the coming days by the EBC. So sit back and stay tuned. DK, it's back to you.
Thank you very much, Sigoni. And as opposed to back to me, I want to say back to the panel, because combining points from you, Dr. Harris, and you, Mr. Ross, in terms of it's telling some of the things that we're still talking about in Trinidad and Tobago, and also looking at whether or not you're cramming or you're studying. In terms of some of the things that were spoken about on the campaign trail and even before Dr. Basdeo, and one of the things that I was hearing is that people are talking about the same thing in different ways. How we phrase and how it is we say, as opposed to just what it is we're talking about, do you think that would have impacted individuals who are listening to these messages?
If we look closely at the elections, where we have reached the elections today and how we have arrived here, one thing we have to understand about the elections, we can think about the internal dynamics of the politics in Trinidad and Tobago. But we cannot overlook the fact that there are external dynamics also that is actually shaping our politics in Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm speaking specifically here to, events that occurred in November of last year in the United States. And I'm really making reference to the election of President Donald Trump and what impact he has had in what we call shaping some of the policies in Trinidad and Tobago. We are also aware of the policies. Primarily in the last 5 weeks, we have heard the Secretary of State making certain pronouncements and statements that has direct economic impact on Trinidad and Tobago. And it is these policies that we can say that will determine our future in the next 5 years. Certain aspects, because on the campaign trail, there were questions that were raised, primarily, for example, with reference to the UNC. A lot of the electoral promises that were made on the campaign trail, one of the questions that was raised by the Prime Minister and others was how are they going to actually raise the funds to meet these expenditures in the years to come. So in that context, we have to think about the economic dynamics, and then we think about the opposition return on that statement was that it all comes back down to efficiency and effectiveness. So it is yet to be seen how they're going to balance efficiency and effectiveness with economic decline that we know the country is going to face in the coming years.
Now, I am the children of school teachers, and when I see certain body language, that is where I want to go. Mr. Ross, I see you shaking your head. Talk to me.
We have been through 2 previous and iterations of this same political party that is currently in opposition. In the second iteration, during the years 2010 to 2015, we had an average, and I'm using the word average, for the entire year, the average price of oil was $100 per barrel. Not to mention what the price of gas was. So we had a windfall. What did we do with it? What did they do with it? They spent it all. They would argue that they put money into the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, but I will counter and say they put a minimal amount in that fund. They spent all that money. They raided NGC. All the profits NGC made were spent. These are facts. These ain't nobody making up nothing, right? And then we are asking this same group of people to come into a scenario where we have reduced revenues. I know we would at some point segue into the conversation about diversification, but to diversify, there are things you need. And I know that we have enough time to get into that. But with respect to this particular opposition, with some of the players who are there, including the current leader, they spent all the money, they saved nothing, the actual national budget ballooned, and the debt increased during a period when they had extended amount of revenue. If you live in a household, in your own personal household, and it so happens that you get a large bonus, what do you do with that bonus as a responsible adult? You take some, you put it aside, you save it, you take the next set, you invest it into something that's different from what you're doing so you could have money somewhere down the road. And you're going to revenue generating activities versus just spending it on things that don't generate revenue. And that's where we were.
But if you're nervous because you've built habits, so yes, you're saving, and yes, you're trying to be prudent with it, how do we become a little less risk averse to say, okay, well, let me take some, not all, but some of that money and try to put it into different places?
You got to have policies that says that I'm sitting here in the present, and in that particular case in 2010, 11, 12, 13, and I'm looking around the world, and I'm looking to see what is the new technology that's coming on board. Okay, let me send some of these students to these universities in China, in Estonia, wherever, let them get into tech, so that when AI hits, we're ready. And it hit, we're not ready. We don't have money, and we're still not ready. So when we talk about diversification, I hope that we don't limit the conversation of diversification to agriculture, that we actually get it to technology. And there's something I want to deliberately point on, which is goods and services. If you notice that the tariff that's being extended from the United States is a tariff on goods, it is not a tariff on services. And to those who are unaware, the companies that we look and think they're selling goods, they're not selling goods. They're mostly really selling services, and I'll point them out. Google, when you look at where they make their money, it's in services, it's not in goods. Apple is not iPhone and iPad, it's services. Amazon, AWS, Amazon Web Services, it's services. Those are not subjected to tariffs. And what I would call from the normal layman in Trinidad, what is a service, is anybody who sits in Trinidad and does something on the internet and receives US dollars into a PayPal account. That's a service. And so there's a lot of opportunities for us to generate foreign exchange and revenue, and to become micro-business, micro-entrepreneurs, medium and even large, by providing services that generally go unscathed from things like tariffs and generally has immense opportunity for growth.
And I don't want to chinks on your answer, Dr. Harris. So we're going to take a short break and come back. But even before we take that break, I want to add the qualifier as well. From the outside coming in or coming back from the outside, what are some of the things that you would have liked to see be in the conversation in the lead up to a general election? But I'll ask you that when we return. Stay with us. We are coming back. This is Race to 21. We'll be back after this.
Tonight, as the nation waits, know that at Standard, you've always made the right choice. We believe everyone deserves a beautiful, comfortable home. At Standard, we bring you the best deals for everyday living. appliances, furniture, electronics, because at Standard, when it comes to price, nobody beats us. Make the winning choice for your home. Shop in store or online at standardtt.com.
The winning numbers in the National Lottery online draws for Monday, 28 April 2025. At 10:30 a.m., play away the number 23 House Mega Extreme Ball called. Pick 2, the numbers 25 and 11 in that order. Pick 4, the numbers 2, 0, 8 and 0 in that order. At 1 p.m., play away the number 13 Crapple. Pick 2, the numbers 31 and 3 in that order, Mega Ball called. Pick 4, the numbers 6, 9, 6 and 1 in that order. At 4 p.m., play away the number 27 Little Snake. Pick 2, the numbers 11 and 14 in that order. Pick 4, the numbers 4, 7, 2 and 6 in that order. And at 7 p.m., play away the number 13 Crapple Mega Ball called. Pick 2, the numbers 35 and 33 in that order. Pick 4, the numbers 4, 3, 8 and 0 in that order. Cashpot, the numbers 2, 9, 16, 20 and 17 in any order, and the multiplier is 3.
Welcome back to a Race to 21 on a TTT. And Dr. Harris, asking for your response, please.
Thanks, DK. So I have paid attention, and I think when we think about the campaign, we have to think about the message and the messaging in terms of the content, but also how that is being put over to the population. I have looked at the two main parties. I've also looked at the Patriotic Front, and when it comes to the messaging, the Yellow Party did exceptionally well in terms of being short and concise. Like, I went to buy newspapers on Friday, and every single daily had their economic points. I would say points on that plan, and we come back to discuss why I say points on that plan. Had their economic points on every single front page, and that is excellent packaging. We'll come back to the substance, right? In terms of the content of the messages, you would have had to look and read the PNM manifesto carefully. And there was a lot in there and a lot of good things in there, but it was 182 pages, which that's, again, the messaging and not necessarily the message. You just asked me about what I would have liked to see having come back into Trinidad. So I'll use the UK as my reference point because that's where I lived for the last 10 or so years. I would have liked to see a debate being held amongst the main political leaders, because if you would like to be the Prime Minister of this country, I would think you should present yourself and talk to each other in a conversation facilitated by someone like yourself, DK, and see what it is you can say to the population to convince them to vote for you. Because admittedly, we operate in a Westminster system and we think about our parliamentarians and our MPs when we go to the poll, but really we are thinking about who's going to be the next Prime Minister. I think at the constituency level, it would have been good to see town hall meetings where all of the candidates are there and they could speak to different issues that concern the constituents. Because of course we're having the national issues that come out on the political platforms, but in a constituency, I know one of the candidates personally, and the things that are coming out in that constituency is simple things like roads, or not being able to provide some services because of concerns for safety. And you don't hear those things on the platform, but you would like to know what your MP would do for you at the constituency level. So I would have liked to see some town halls, and I would like to see a national debate.
Right. And what we'll see at this point in time is the past MP for Mayaro, Rushton Parry. He is joining us. Mr. Parry, thank you so much for your time. And I want to ask you about your thoughts at this point in time. Polls have closed. What are some of those things that are on your mind as you, like us all, waiting to hear the results of this general elections?
Well, clearly, having sit in the parliament for the last 2 terms, and I understand the rigors and the requirements of working yourself within the party politics, working yourself within your own understanding of the way things work. I can tell you, I'm fairly confident that that the UNC did sufficient work in the last 6 weeks to squeeze out a win today. I thought, like Dr. Harris's observation, that their campaign was on point. I think their messaging was on point as well. And if the electorate, that swing votes, I always believe that neither party has enough base votes to win an election. You have to convince this 130, 140,000 swing voters, the ones who are normally on the fence, who wants to listen to policies and issues. You have to convince them that, look, we are ready to take the mantle, and more so now, where we are staring down a very, very difficult 5 years ahead. You need the best governors to take charge. So at the end of the day, there was a lot of points. There was a lot of, I call it menu of a to-do list. My challenge with both the UNC and the PNM's manifesto, there was very little philosophy in terms of how do you interconnect what I'm going to do with the long-term plans. And I'll give you a simple example. We had a wonderful conversation around the cannabis industry and how we are going to push it forward in terms of new business and so on. Now, things that I thought that we probably could have said differently in terms of the platform conversation. How are we going to connect the industry to new job creation? How are we going to connect the industry to hiring our graduates from UTT UE? How are we going to connect the industry to improving our intellectual property laws to ensure that when these foreign investors come, that their trade secrets, their science, their engineering can be protected? How do we create new business opportunities for cooperatives? How do we put these farmers together? So I know sometimes the political platform is not the place to go too much in depth, but one would have thought that when you have to really convince that 150,000 swing voters in 6 weeks, I think those are the kind of things that we ought to have been having the conversations about on the political platform. I noticed that today the voting in my area was pretty slow. I drove about the place. I voted at around 10 o'clock this morning, and I was number 79 in my polling division. Now, in the last 2 times that I voted, at 10 o'clock, I would have been around 200. So I took note of the slow pace. After lunch, I know it picked up a little bit. But like all of you, I too wait to see what happens at the end of the evening.
But looking at those hows that you would have proposed, Mr. Parry, I want to add another how. How do we interconnect policies, issues, and representation? So you talk about being kind of slow, being number 79 at about 10 o'clock. Is it that you would have found people saying, I wanted to vote for Mr. Parry, So in terms of like people coming in and being that representative, how do you think that plays in, as opposed to just saying, okay, well, this is the party's line, this is what the party is putting forward, this is the party's manifesto, or points to take us through the next 5 years?
Well, I did my part. When I was not selected as the candidate, there was a lot of people who was pushing that, Rushton, you ought to go as an independent and so on. I'm a lifetime member of the United National Congress. I still remain a member of the United National Congress. I have no issues with my party. I would have had issues with some of the things that our leadership were doing when, in coming to the internal elections. I still believe the UNC is the best vehicle to government. There are a few things that we need to tweak, a few actions, and I'm hoping we form government tonight or first thing in the morning while we have a team looking at governance going forward. I trust the internal team of the party will start to work on some of those issues. And that is where you get the interconnection that you're asking for. How does your policy in the party connect to governance for the country? So I'll give you an example. If I want to drive information technology to manage my party, it means that IT becomes a conversation in government policy. If I want to create systems in the party to run my party, that levels out into how you run governance as well. So you talk about the party, you talk about, governance, and then the representation, your MPs, your candidates. We must always remember that the persons that you put before the electorate are just not representation for you on issues of road and drains and so on. These are potential governors of the country for the next 5 years. People who are going to run ministries. I don't believe you have to be a subject matter expert to be an MP, but you must have a fair knowledge. You must have a skill to transfer your government's or your cabinet's policy to the public officers and make sure they can carry your party's policy into governance. So it's not an easy task, but it is not impossible. And I mean, coming out of the business sector, I know Antonio, my good friend, he too would have had years of experience at the highest level of management in energy companies. These things are not impossible, but it requires a bit of tact. It requires a bit of understanding. And language is always so important, and how you carry about and convince people around you that this is how we have to go. So in my view, all is not lost. I look forward to the next 5 years and seeing if we can, pulling back this country in terms of the headwinds that are coming. And I believe that we have the capacity in Trinidad and Tobago to do it.
Just before you go, Mr. Parry, I love the fact that you're talking about the use of tact, the use of languaging. What do you think might help whoever forms the next administration in terms of getting buy-in across that political divide for these next 5 years that, as you have described, are going to be very trying, very telling for the nation of Trinidad and Tobago?
Whoever becomes Prime Minister tonight or tomorrow, I believe that it is not going to be an easy road. It is not going to be impossible. But the leader, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, has to be prepared to make some tough decisions. But he or she must also be prepared to hold the hands of the most vulnerable in our society and say, look, we are going to hold your hand and walk through this fire, come hell or high water. Because there are those in our country who really have been dealt a bad hand. They don't require a handout, they require a hand up. And I do believe that with innovative and inspirational leadership that is connected to the jobs of the future, to where we want to take Trinidad and Tobago. I was listening to Ms. Harris a couple of minutes ago, and one of the things that I felt was missing in the last 5 weeks in terms of manifesto is labor and the future. Russ spoke about artificial intelligence. How are we going to make our managers more emotionally intelligent as AI takes over the workforce? What parliamentary systems we're going to put in place to cushion the effects of jobs fallouts? I'm not hearing the union speak about that thing. So I'm saying, in my closing comment on this thing, is that if we don't, or the new Prime Minister coming in tomorrow with a new cabinet, there are so much more issues over the next 5 to 10 years that we need to plant seeds from tomorrow morning that we have to cultivate to make sure that Trinidad and Tobago deviates into the right track, especially in a Trump Washington for the next 5 years going forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rushton. Vijay Parry, a two-term representative for the constituency of Mayaro, weighing in on the conversation. And I want to bring you in, please, Dr. Basdeo, in terms of the same way you'd have people taking down signage that they would have put up election signage, hopefully. What are some of those seeds? What are some of those next steps that you'd like to see the person who's assuming the reign of power do from this evening, tomorrow, those first steps?
Something that is very familiar with the political parties, that if you look at their manifestos, both the UNC and the PNM, one was much more detailed, more voluminous, one was more in the point form. But they are generally, when you look at the manifestos of both political parties, there is similar issues that both parties centered on. It is just how they package it and how they bring it across. So, for example, if I'm using one on the political platform, you look at the Prime Minister and his talk on pension, and he stressed on what is pension and what is the role and function of the party should it be re-elected, and it is not going to touch the pension and so forth. And then the UNC on the opposite hand came with a similar issue with regard to pension. They're going to protect the pensions, but what did they add on to it? There'll be no taxation on what we call pension benefits and so forth. So the themes are similar among the various political parties. It is how they bring it onto their political platform, how the voters now are going to consume this message. So there isn't great difference of variation in the, let's say, the policies itself. It is how the parties actually bring it across.
You see difference in the manifestos, Mr. Ross?
Yes, but there's something that gives me pause in terms of how the UNC came about their manifesto. As a matter of fact, I was able to go to the website in Jamaica and see how it came about, and it was actually somebody else's manifesto that they modified. And they forgot to remove the Jamaican flag at one point. So let's be honest here, okay? And I understand what the good doctor next to me had said. There's really, in Trinidad and Tobago, no massive difference in the issues. For example, like if a lot of times we make comparisons and you want to compare to the United States of America, you've got the Democrats, they've got their clear policies, process, procedures, things that they believe in, bread and butter issues, and they stick to that. Religion, guns. In Trinidad, we all have more or less the same bread and butter issues, and it varies by constituency between urban and rural. The difference lies in governance. When you actually get there and you meet the situation that you have in front of you, how do you manage it to the benefit of all, but also how do you manage it to the benefit of those who supported you to get there in the first place? And one of the things that we've seen time and time again, and I can say it because the election is over today, is that historically one of the negatives that's always hurled against the People's National Movement, and one of the positives that people accentuate with respect to the United National Congress, is the United National Congress helps their people more than the People's National Movement does. No matter how you swing, you're going to hear that story. And I dare anybody to challenge me on that. But at the end of the day, the question is, when we get in there on this new mandate of 5 years, what do we do based on the current local scenario, the international situation that we have to deal with, whether it be Dragon Gas, whether it be Trump and his administration, and how they view relationships around the world with Maduro, etc., and how we navigate that, as well as how do we look going forward into a world of artificial intelligence, new technology. I mean, as much as we say things are bad here, some people make it sound like things really bad. Look at the unemployment rate. It's low. It's always been low. But at the same time, look at the underemployment rate and look at how many people are stuck in the public service, eking it out, and when we should be able to transport them from there into a place where we're able to use that human resource and manpower to diversify the economy. And I think that's where we need to look.
But we have about 2 minutes before we go to the break. But answer the person who says, but Mr. Ross, the People's National Movement has been in power more than anybody else for a longer period of time.
We have to be very specific about which periods of time, and we have to also include the fact that at the early PNM at $9 and $10 a barrel, you have to also factor that in. You have to, but you also have to factor in when you sit here with your free education, it came at a cost. Somebody paid for it. Free healthcare, not the greatest healthcare in the world, but free. There's a lot of things we take for granted here that are free. All of us here sitting down with our little degrees, free. We didn't pay for it. Those free things cost money, and that money came from those same people who built the Point Lisas Industrial Estate and all those LNG plants sitting down there that are now able to sit and say, even if the dragon is asleep at this point in time, whenever that dragon wakes up, we now have the facilities to be able to process that gas.
Take that in your pooch, DK. All right. All right. So we take a short break. We continue Race to 21. As results come in, we will be sharing them with you. But we're having a very spirited discussion here. We invite you to stay with us. We return after this.
Tonight, as the nation waits, know that at Standard, you've always made the right choice. We believe everyone deserves a beautiful, comfortable home. At Standard, we bring you the best deals for everyday living. Appliances, furniture, electronics, because at Standard, when it comes to price, nobody beats us. Make the winning choice for your home. Shop in store or online at standardtt.com.
The data free, the data fast. So much gigs, you're making masses. Free TikTok, Netflix and FB. Scotch YouTube with endless IG. Data by the week, data by the day. Buy fortnight or when you get paid. Real savings too with auto renew is the best value. Well, you will get you. Everybody know. Anyhow you want your data, any kind of price we cater. B-Mobile is always better. That's why dice my data network. When it comes to data, nobody beats B-Mobile. Dice my data network.
Welcome back to Race to 21. We are speaking with Dr. Mukesh Basdeo, Antonio Ross, and Dr. Jamelia Harris. And let's get into labor. I really want to talk about this diversification. And when we're talking about diversification, I want to push back a little bit. Agriculture can have technology in it, Mr. Ross, but that is a decision that I didn't say that you said they were mutually exclusive. But in terms of, if we're looking at diversification, if we're looking at labor markets, how do we approach where we are now, Dr. Harris, to get where we want to go? And let me even ask the question, where we want to go?
So, in the beginning, one of the first things that I said is I was a bit, was the level of discourse. And I think this issue of labor is a perfect example of it. Because on the platform and sort of the general conversation, it has been stuck at the 5%, the 4%, the 10%. And we have, I don't think any of the parties really put labor at the core of their manifestos, as the former MP just said. And that is sort of fundamental to any plan that you have for the country. If you're thinking about diversification, you need to think about having the manpower to be able to diversify. If you're thinking about mobilizing more foreign exchange, as Mr. Ross said, you need to think about how can your population earn that and not just dependent on large companies. So I was a little bit disappointed that labor wasn't more central to the debate. Where labor came in was just wages. And if we want to think about labor, we also have to think about fixing some things in the country that's not just on wages. So just to pick up on what Mr. Ross was saying, yes, we have a lot of underemployment, and we all know that many people have their side hustle. But in terms of the government and the government being able to function, a big part of that is making sure that the informal sector becomes formalized, because that is how we generate tax revenue. If we have our gig entrepreneurs in the digital economy, and you're selling your services online, sure, you're going to earn your foreign exchange. But if that is in the informal economy, the government isn't being able to tax that. And this all comes back to we need more revenue to be able to provide the services that we like and we get used to in Trinidad and Tobago. I think fundamentally, and this picks up on a point from before as well, I am happy that we are at a place in our country where we are not having a conversation as to whether or not health should be free or whether or not education should be free. And we do have to thank the PNM government for that, going all the way back to Dr. Eric Williams. But to afford these things, we also have to have revenue. And I think oftentimes, like when you talk to some people and you say, oh, you're going to vote, nah, the government didn't give me no work. It's not the government's job to give you a job. It's the government's job to facilitate the economy so that the economy can provide jobs for you. The government could train you, which they have done in terms of investing in education. But at the end of the day, we have to have an economy that thrives and functions in a way that could create employment opportunities. And this would take us into a different conversation in terms of private sector development and employment creation. But I think in terms of labor, we shouldn't have to have these wage negotiations every X number of years. In many developed countries, your wages increase incrementally because we know that there's inflation. So I have never had to negotiate my wages at University of Warwick because every year it just goes up a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. And if we had something like this, it would be much better because we wouldn't have these wage negotiations and using it as a bargaining chip and getting on a platform and complaining about 5% or 4% or 10%. But we would also, as a government, be able to have better control of our resources in terms of the public purse, because you wouldn't then be faced with 10 billion in back pay if you get a 10% increase. But you would then be able to say, okay, I know next year is going to increase by this percentage and I'm going to plan for that. And so I would have liked to see a bit more conversation on that. And that's why I think we're a little bit stuck.
And looking at the fact that you were talking about manifesto, we were speaking about manifestos a little earlier, and you spoke to the fact that the PNM's manifesto was almost 200 pages, the Patriotic Front was almost 40 pages, and that's a different approach. So, but just before you get there, what we want to do though, we want to go to Jason John, host of The Corner. He is at the Patriotic Front, and he is speaking to the leader of the Patriotic Front. So we go to that. Jason?
We are coming to you live from the South Office of the Patriotic Front, where political leader Michaela Pandey, daughter of former Prime Minister Basdio Pandey, is hosting a viewing party for her supporters and members as they reveal and receive the results of the 2025 general elections. The Patriotic Front is contesting 37 of the 41 seats in Trinidad and Tobago, with the exception of Point Fortin, Port of Spain, St. Anne's West, Diego Martin Central and Diego Martin East. Here we have with us a very special guest, and I would like to introduce political leader for the Patriotic Front, Miss Michaela Pandey. Hi, Miss Michaela, and how are you?
Good night. I'm fine. I'm great. I'm a bit tired, but I'm good.
I can expect that. So tell me a bit about how has this experience been for you thus far?
It's been good. It's been really good. It's a growing experience, a learning experience, and I treasure every moment of it, the good and the bad. But it's been great. It's been great. I feel so proud of everyone. I'm proud of the candidates who took part in this mammoth task for a young party. So I just feel really proud. We were able to take the first step, which is entering into the electoral arena, and I'm really, really proud about that. Really proud.
As you speak about, this massive challenge, how do you think your father would feel, seeing what you have accomplished thus far? You're contesting 37 of the 41 seats. I mean, that is by itself a huge accomplishment.
Yes, I think he would have been really, really proud for trying, to go out there and he always said to me, did you do your best? And have you put your best foot forward? And in getting 37 candidates, the second highest number after the PNM, that in itself, as you've said, was a great success. But we're in there now, and we're there to stay.
Okay, and, moving forward, I know it may be just a bit too early to, look at the projections, but I'm assuming that you have a plan and you do intend to continue with this stride that you have begun. I mean, you won't die out and, wilt away. You plan to move full steam ahead.
Absolutely. So that's what normally happens with political parties. They form and then they contest an election and then they die out and then they come back up again. We don't intend to do that. Win, lose or draw, we are here to stay, and the Patriotic Front is here to build. My father did that with the UNC, and you would have known we had the ULF, and then he did it with the UNC. Things don't always go your way. They don't always go your way, but it's about trying and working hard at what you do, enjoying what you do, and knowing that you're doing it for the right reason.
I just have one final question. This election, it was a very short time to prepare in terms of being notified of the election. You would have, like I said, 37 of the 41 seats. My question is, you would have somehow garnered a lot of support and love from everyone throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Is there anything you would like to, tell all of Trinidad and Tobago in terms of sharing that heartfelt appreciation
Now you're going to make me cry. I felt emotional all day. I just want to say thank you so much. And that's what I say, regardless of the result. It's such an achievement, such an accomplishment to have met so many people throughout the country. And yes, it was a short election, very, very short. And we could never have competed in terms of money. Campaign financing, it was just, I can't even begin to explain. You guys would have seen for yourself what they could have done with all that money they had with those campaign trucks, and how many hampers and food and roofs they could have repaired. It was obscene, but it is what it is. You come in as a new party and you get your feet wet and you're in there and you learn and you grow from it. And I'm really, really proud, and I know my father would have been as well.
All right, Michaela, I'd like to thank you so very much, and I wish you all the best, but we'll be here to check in with you throughout the night. Okay? I am Jason John, coming to you live from the South Office of the Patriotic Front. Now back to you in studio.
Thank you very much, Jason. And remember, you can continue to look out for Jason as he traverses Trinidad and Tobago on the corner content that we have coming out of the newsroom at TTT. Reminding you, TTT, we are here, as well as TTT Live Online. We're also on Talk City 91.1 FM. And on the next level of radio, Next 99.1 FM, we also have Vibes and Votes. So we're still talking about the election, but a slightly different vibe with it. But Dr. Basdeo, looking at what it is we would have just been hearing from Michaela Pandey, 37 constituencies contested, talking about a growing experience, a learning experience. What do you take away from that? And do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing having so many aspirants outside of the PNM and the UNC?
I think the question is whether or not did she bite out? Did she bite too much by going into going at 37 constituencies? Originally, she had said she was contesting all 41 constituencies because she did have candidates in the two Tobago constituencies, East and West. And so hearing Ms. Pandey so early in the night, the question is that, is it could be seen as a concession that the way the conversation went between the person conducting the interview, it's why it all was around the issue of the experience. So, well, I guess we had to wait to see how the results pan out in these 37 constituencies. What will be the Patriotic Front? How will their performance in the 37 constituencies?
Feel almost as though people getting a plaque or certificate for participation.
I think the concerns right now will be these candidates, would they be able to actually secure the 1/8 of the votes that is required for them to save their deposits? That is what we'll be looking at as we progress throughout the night.
I'm waiting for your shoulder to finish jumping so I could ask you a question by your leave. But in terms of securing deposits, whether or not that happens, looking at the fact that people are willing to not just seek alternatives, but try to create alternatives. What do you think that says, Mr. Ross?
I have a different school of thought, to be quite honest. I am quite happy to be where I am in the People's National Movement, and I will stay right there, and I will advocate for changes that I believe are required to make the PNM a better party.
You know, I must ask you what some of those changes could be.
We won't get deep into that because sometimes we'll have little internal squabbles, right?
Naturally.
But I will say this. I am all for as many persons in Trinidad and Tobago who are in a position to vote, to participate in the processes, whether it be at the local government level or at the national elections level. So as many people as possible participating, it's better for the democratic process. So I have no ill will or feelings towards smaller parties, medium parties, as long as people are saying, look, listen, I want to see a better Trinidad and Tobago. I do not believe the PNM could do it or the UNC could do it, so I'm going to create my own little vehicle and I'll drive it and see where it goes and carry a different message, an alternative message, and I'm all for that. I mean, that's part of what democracy is.
What do you think those alternative vehicles do in terms of trying to accumulate votes, Dr. Basdeo?
The question you're asking is about a multi-party system. Do we operate within a multi-party system? There have been times when we can say multi-party systems have existed in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. The most recent would have been in 2015, where we had the PNM, the UNC, and then we had the COP candidate. Prior to 2015, there have been instances of where you have, well, the one that prior to that would have been with the NAR, that formed the alliance in 1995, and then would have won one of the seats in that period, 2000 to 2001 elections in Tobago. So when we think about third parties, the biggest success in what we call third parties coalition would have been with the formation of the NAR in 1986 and the Partnership Administration in 2010. But as we look back at these two political events that actually took place in our political history, we can see that both experiments, both experiments actually ended up in what we call, with the coalition basically falling apart. So the issue is that how do you hold these coalitions together? And I think this is where the politics have actually reached. And this is where the concerns is persons may have views that we say that they have adverse views against coalition, because coalition politics tends to be a very unstable type of politics.
And you say that, you make me want to do two things. Start to sing about the anchor holding and go to TPP a little bit. But it also makes me want to go to the manifesto as put forward by the United National Congress. And I want to get to a point that you would have intimated, Dr. Harris. What's the difference between points and a plan?
Good question. And I use points when I spoke about the UNC manifesto because there were many, but we didn't quite, well, at least from my perspective, I didn't see how you were going to get from those points to realizing any sort of action and outcomes. And I'll do by comparison with the other two manifestos to make the point. So the PNM manifesto, it was the only manifesto that articulated a theory of change. And a theory of change is where you could say, this is the action or the group of actions that I have, and I'm going to use these actions to achieve a particular outcome. And the PNM manifesto was the only one that did that and went into some detail. And there were different activities and these 6 different points. I also think but it was long. And you had to read it and understand it. And I think the issue with the PNM manifesto was not the message. The message was good. It was the messaging, right? The Patriotic Front, I commend Michaela Pandey for being a new and a young party, as she just said, but also being able to pull together a manifesto that showed some costing. And that is one of the main issues with the UNC manifesto. We don't know how they're going to afford it. With the Patriotic Front manifesto, the other thing that was commendable was the difference between short-term and long-term priorities, but also they were very ambitious in saying, we're going to do these things in the short term and the long term, and this will be the outcome. So they provided a costed manifesto with short-term and long-term priorities and some outcomes that they think we can enact some change here. And I think that's commendable. The UNC manifesto, and why I think is points and not plans. Well, firstly, you have to say, to get from point A to point B, these are the activities and the different things I need to do. And this is not what we got. The other thing that troubled me with the UNC manifesto, you cannot do all those things in 5 years. And it just seemed as though it was a list of different things that everybody would want to hear, which errs on the side of populism. Because I read it and I thought, I agree with some of these things, but I don't agree with these other things here. And I'm sure someone else would have read it and think they agree with the things that I disagree with. So there was something in there to appeal to everyone. Whether or not you can do all those things, I highly doubt it, especially since it has been costed. But also, it's just not feasible because some of the things that were being suggested would require either lots of money or having a special majority in Parliament to make some of the legislative changes that would have been required. So this is why I am and remain quite skeptical about the UNC manifesto.
Do you think that manifesto may have been a product of a coalition of interests, Mr. Ross? Must have a scratchy head.
A coalition of self-interest, you mean? Or coalition of interests?
You can set your parameters and answer.
The other thing that let me make one small correction. The People's National Movement, yes, they had a big manifesto, but they also had what you call manifestos. They had it.
Yes,
it did
this
exist.
is true.
Right. But for me, what bothered me about, and that's why I used those words, it's very deliberate, self-interest. When you look at all the heads, you could automatically point to something that's a self-interest to them, and then they put all those self-interests into a document and they call it manifesto. It's self-interest. And as the good doctor just pointed out, it's a bunch of things that everybody want to hear. But you can't do those things. You can't give nobody no 10% increase. The last time that took place was under NAR. And you know what happened then, right? We had to go to the IMF. Everybody lost the COLA. Half of the people got laid off. And this is very interesting that you had pointed out something about Trump in the USA. This is very Trumpian. What they're doing, where they're gutting the federal government right now, in order to implement plans to save money, you have to terminate people so you don't get that recurring expenditure, which is that bill that you have to pay every single month, every single year. And the best way to save money is to fire people when you have a public enterprise. Sorry, a private enterprise. And that segues us into the issue of privatization. In order for those plans to work, they've got to find money. And if the price of oil stay where it is, the price of gas stay where it is, the production doesn't increase, it means the revenue you have coming in, even if you plan to diversify, it's going to take some time, so your revenue is fixed. Your expenses are going to go up because you promised already to increase your expenses. You've got to find money. So what you're going to do, go buy National Flour Mills, sell it. You're going to go buy Tiantec, sell it. And when a private enterprise holds on to that entity called Tiantec, they have to increase the price of electricity. That affects the same people that you claim you're trying to help. Then you've got to go gut that public service to reduce your wage bill. We're going to give 10% to 60% of the public service and send the next 40% home. Yes, you fulfill your promise. Then you go to WASA, you do the same thing. I know they're trying to create this misinformation about that the People's National Movement, which is the present government, planned to send people home at WASA. But they were speaking about reorganization and restructuring the management and reducing the weight on top, which is different from a scenario when you go and you privatize something like WASA. You've got to send home a lot of people and farm out those jobs and services to private companies. At the end of the day, you're looking, if that's the type of manifesto that they're going to ascribe to and they're going to follow that process, you're looking at NAR, and you're looking, which is incidentally where the current leader of the opposition came from. So she's buying back that same stuff that then led to the unfortunate coup that we had. And I pray that something like that never happens again. But that sort of a economic upheaval leads to a lot of disgruntled people on the ground, and you never know where it takes you. But we sure is one place is going to take you straight to the IMF.
I want to stay on that idea for just a minute and a half more, please, Dr. Basdeo. When you have individuals coming together under grouping, what are some of those things that you would look at through the lens of political science to say, how do we create a hierarchy of things that we're going to put forward of messages and messaging?
Well, in the context of what you're going to get out there, manifestos are just policy issues. If you go back to 2010, one of the first legislative item that was placed in the parliament or on the legislative agenda was the manifesto, the partnership manifesto, and they made it to be basically a legislative document, a legal document, in that they committed themselves to implement what was stated in their manifesto. So in this context, it was like a legally binding relationship between the voters, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and the then government of the day. The question we can ask ourselves is that of that legal document that found its way into the parliament, how many of the policies in that document were actually implemented? Was it 30, was it 40, was it 50, was it 60%? I think I haven't done the research to actually get into the various, let's say, policy areas to discuss, well, how much would they be able to actually achieve in that 5-year period. Now, there are concerns I can agree to, that is maybe the quantum of these policies that are being announced on this platform, whether or not it can be achieved in a 5-year period. That is something that is whether we can deal, whether it is unrealistic or whether it's realistic. But at the end of the day, a number of these policies and agreements that they have arrived at, it is that when whoever is sworn in, either by Wednesday or Thursday of this week, they would have to face the reality of these policies, these decisions that they have taken.
And one of the decisions we're going to take at this point in time is to go to One Tranquility. Sunil Lala is at Balize House. He has someone from the People's National Movement. Sunil.
Good evening. We're back here at Balize House, and I'm joined with someone from the People's National Movement, Laurel Lizama. She's the education officer here at the PNM. Good evening.
Good evening, Sunil, and good evening to all of your viewers viewing you on TTT. And welcome to Balize House. And this is a very exciting time for us, a very serious time in the history of our country. And we are looking forward to see what the night unfolds. We are cautiously optimistic. And we're happy to have you here and all the other media houses. And we're pleased to talk to the nation.
Definitely. I know you have some results for us, but just before we go into that, yes, tell us, how was today?
Today, for the most part, we have had limited reports of trouble. We've heard of long lines for voting. We've heard of an easy, smooth process. I think most people were processed between 5 to 10 minutes when they went into their polling stations. What we have noted, however, is that the opposition party, from the word go, from very early, had been trying to mount a campaign of some sort of disorganization or something happening with the EBC and laying a lot of blame on the EBC. But the PNM continues to have confidence in the EBC, in the independence of the EBC and our independent institutions here in Trinidad and Tobago. And we are confident with the presence of the observers from both CARICOM and the Commonwealth that it was a fairly smooth day. We had all our systems in place, so any challenges, our teams headed by our campaign manager and our deputy political leader, Rohan Sinanan, as well as our deputy political leader, Colm Imbert, who assisted with any challenges that we would have had throughout the day.
Voter turnout, how did voter turnout look like? Is it, some people are saying it was a high voter turnout so far. Is the People's National Movement of the same opinion?
Well, from all preliminary indications in Tobago this morning, there was a fairly high voter turnout, and it has been consistent. That's what we can safely say so far. We have not gotten feedback from all of our poll clerks and agents that we have had stationed at the different polling stations, but it has been consistent. That's the safest thing I can tell you for now.
And just for what people would be asking for now, your result, your preliminary results.
So very early in the night. It's going to be a long night ahead. You know, there are 41 constituencies. Each constituency has roughly 40 or more polling divisions. And within each polling division, some are split into 2 or 3. So we only have very preliminary numbers right now. And based on our numbers so far, I can say that from our preliminary tabulations, the PNM is ahead in Port of Spain South with 243 votes to 130 from the UNC. These are just preliminary results as well. We have the lead as well in Arima. We have the lead as well in Lopino Bonnet West. Well, not Lopino Bonnet West anymore. It's now called Aruca Lopino. So we're in the lead in that constituency as well. Let me tell you, in Lebre, our numbers 968 to 600. In Diego Martin West, 329 to 73. Let me just get down here. Sorry, it's really slow moving here. Aruka Lopino 228 to 131, and Arima 200 to 100. These are what our preliminary figures are looking like, and this would just be feedback from maybe 2 polling stations in the constituency.
Of course, all eyes would be on those marginals, what we call marginals here in Trinidad and Tobago. Any preliminary results with regards to that so far?
We have from the marginals, based on what I have seen here, I have nothing listed here from any, we have no information as yet from the marginal constituencies, but we have put our best foot forward. We've put in some excellent candidates. Our machinery was well oiled, and we anticipate good things coming out of this result.
Just finally from me, what can we expect at the PNM's Balize House? I see the stage is already set.
Yes.
The infrastructure, the final touches have been made.
Yes.
What can we expect here at the Balize House?
So all of our candidates are in their different constituency campaign headquarters right now. So you will not see any candidates here for at least another 2 hours or so, because they would be celebrating with their local, or they would be taking in the results and celebrating with their local home teams, and then we would have different constituencies making their way to Balize House. So later on, we anticipate members of the leadership, including the Prime Minister, General Secretary, Deputy Political Leaders, to all be here later this evening. We anticipate that the candidates, as they come, will come with their supporters as well. But we don't expect any noise or crowd for the next 2 hours at least or so, as the numbers slowly come in.
Well, we have been talking to Laurel Lizama, the education officer here at the People's National Movement. She's a very hard person to track down, because we've been trying to track her down for just about an hour and a half now.
I've been here. I've been here, but I'm.
So we hope to have you back in just a short.
Absolutely.
And we'll give the our listeners, our viewers, a next update. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sunil. And we continue the discussion when we return from this break. There are a few points, that I want to throw to the panel, and we'll do so when we return. Stay with us. Race to 21, it continues after this.
Tonight, as the nation waits, know that at Standard, you've always made the right choice. We believe everyone deserves a beautiful, comfortable home. At Standard, we bring you the best deals for everyday living. Appliances, furniture, electronics, because at Standard, when it comes to price, nobody beats us. Make the winning choice for your home. Shop in store or online at standardtt.com.
Diamonds are forever, and so are true sports fans. Here in Trinidad and Tobago, the women do it the best. And if there's one man we know we could trust, is the 12th man, Andre Errol. Catch him every Thursday on TTT's #1 sports show. And guess what? It's the 5th season, guys. The 5th season, so tune in. It's pure vibes, energy, attention to detail, and you don't want to miss it. My name is Kai Selva, and I'm your former 2-time Olympian, and I'm encouraging you all to tune in every Tuesday. You don't want to miss it. Trust me.
Welcome back to Race to 21. Very happy to say that we have Mwale Henry joining the panel at this point in time, an executive leadership advisor, behavioral pollster, and data maven at Data Driven. And one of the things that I would have heard you say at a point in time, Mr. Henry, whatever we disdain, we do not examine. So I want to ask you, what are some of those things that you've been examining in this 6 weeks leading up to the general election? Thank you.
Odike, thank you so much for having me. When you look at the electoral environment, there was a high level of social media impact. And in political cycles, when you talk about political marketing, you have penetration, inundation, or saturation. And you would have seen campaigns going through different cycles. The first cycle, you would have seen the UNC, since 2015, never stopped campaigning. They had their Monday night forums, and they were consistently placing that messaging portion. And now when you have this snap election, or a sudden election, or unexpected election, as some would say, you would have seen the campaign, the PNM, would have gone through different cycles. And I would have identified the People's National Movement, they would have had a key event at Point 14, which would have been a turning point. And in that turning point, the messaging changed from not just a bold chapter, but to fight, fight, fight. And that messaging of the global political context, what we saw in the environment, how it would impact the country. So for me, clearly there was an effort from both political parties to dominate the space. Secondly, there was also an effort to reshape the message or narrative. And then thirdly, clearly there was also an effort, which we will see in the polls, if the general public was inundated with the messaging, because there was a clear attempt by the UNC to change the face of the party or the presentation of the party. And in that face change we would say how the electorate reacted. Was this a genuine change? Is this what we call vote them out movement? Or is this an acceptance of what is being presented as a change election?
But looking at that saturation, inundation, different stages, it brings me back. I want to ask you to comment on that, Mr. Ross, but doing it in the context of what you would have said from the rollout at the University of Woodford Square, how the campaign would have developed.
Well, one of the things about the People's National Movement as a very well-oiled organization is they read what's happening as it's happening and they pivot accordingly. Unlike the other party where they stuck with yellow is the code, they stuck with a blackface campaign, which is they were presenting people of African descent in their social media campaign, even though those people are actually not in their actual physical campaign. And so the People's National Movement was pivoting as they saw the change in demands during that 6-week period. So I think that would have accounted for them addressing different things at different points in time. And at the same time, you have to be mindful that if the opposition presents a particular point or argument, you have to, at some points in time, rebut it. And that takes you down a specific rabbit hole. So I think, you've got to be able to pivot. It's like two boxers in the ring. And you can't come into the ring with one single game plan and then you realize, oh shucks, this other boxer is not what I looked at in all them films that I looked at, and now I have to adjust. And as with any other sport, the political arena is similar. And I think the People's National Movement has been able to pivot their messaging during the campaign to match the specific points in time as required along the campaign trail.
Talk to me about that, Dr. Basdew, in terms of like responding to that cut and thrust, those parries, those rebuttals, those accusations, those positions.
Looking back at the period, let's say the last 6 weeks, from my observation, from a political standpoint, I would say that the People's National Movement has been responding, in most instances, to the UNC. I would look at the UNC that they had a particular advantage in that when you look at how their campaign was structured, they had, in some instances, they had multiple meetings that was aired on multiple media houses on a similar day. Their political leader did not appear on a number of these platforms, in that it was decentralized to a certain extent, that they had their deputy political leaders that were leading these campaigns and so forth in a number of areas. And how I look at it is that the UNC had a particular advantage going into it. And that advantage was clear at the announcement of the date of the election. And we had discussions within the media as to where the UNC was being asked, where it was reported in the newspaper, that to give up some of the slots that they would have purchased since December of last year. So what it tells me is that the UNC had, we all knew for a fact that once January 1 came, we were entering into an election year. We all knew for a fact that the budget is to be delivered in the month of October, right? We knew for a fact that you cannot go into an election campaign in October without a budget. So a budget had to be done before August. we knew for a fact that the parliament will stand dissolved at the end of August. These were specifics, and therefore, when we look at in the context of the UNC, they basically understood these timelines and these specific dates that were present on the calendar. So when they purchase up the time slots and so forth in the various media houses, and then you had the election date being announced, and you say, okay, there are 5 weeks of campaigning, that was it. And it was clearly demonstrated when we look onto the nightly broadcasts. You would see that the UNC was in control of a number of the airwaves. The ads started to appear in the month of December. They started the campaign in December of 2024. The ads started to appear before news broadcasts in 1 or 2, and then it picked up, the momentum picked up in January, February, March. So it's clear that one party had an advantage coming into this election with regard to broadcasts, ads, and so forth. And so this is where we are at this point in time. So the results tonight will demonstrate which party was able to get their message out at a better, in a better way, in a form and fashion.
4 points, one question. Mr. Henry said that as opposed to December, the United National Congress has been campaigning since 2015. The People's National Movement, they would have also on days had different campaigns that were available on different platforms. And the same United National Congress that would have been approached sometimes to get different slots because they said they're buying up all those slots. At the same time, there's a complaint that they can't get onto certain media houses, which is interesting. But the fourth thing, though, answer the person who speaks to the People's National Movement or the United National Congress having those disparate meetings and says, does that show decentralization or does that show a level of disorganization?
Well, I would not look at it as a point of disorganization. If I take what Dr. Henry was saying, and he went back to 2015. If I go back to, let's say, 2020, the last general election in 2020, and we look at what transpired in that period, in 2021, in January of 21, we had a THA election. We all know the results of that THA election was 6-6. In the 10 months that followed, you had what we call a reorganizing of what we call the electoral districts in Tobago to bring it into 15. Now, if we take the politics in Tobago and try to mirror it, in 2020, the People's National Movement won the 2 parliamentary seats convincingly in Tobago. But by January of 2021, you had a result of 6-6 between the PDP and the PNM. And then you go down to around, by the end of 2021, you have a result of 14-1. So, which is telling us that something went wrong. And then in 2023, you had a local government election. And the local government election gave us a result of where the UNC contested less electoral districts, but won the majority of what you call votes in 7 regional corporations. Although the result was 7-7, but the point was that the UNC made specific gains in a number of corporations. And now we are here in 2025. So there are specific political markers that we can identify between 2020 to 2025, where we are today, to see whether there have been any advantages or disadvantages that would have accrued to any of these political parties.
And I'm not sure if we're going to the NTA now with Mahalia Joseph Wharton, but while we're sorting that out, I want to get your thoughts on that, please, Mr. Henry.
Well, it is true that to Dr. Basdeo's point, it is true that you would have seen clear markers of that momentum that was playing for the UNC. However, we have to be cautious, whereby success in itself is a formula. So when you look at Lengua, Maruga, you would have clearly seen that even in the pronouncements of the Monday night forums, whereby it's the worst government ever, there were extremities in the expression of the state. However, they were able to not just win that seat, but win the seat from someone who was a former local government councillor and a sitting MP. So those are two layers, which is the current MP, Michelle Benjamin, which was a clear indication, as I've always said, in marginal seats, one of the key indicators is that local context. So the PNM knew that the selection of a local candidate that has local roots can stem the tide of any national unpopularity or that media swing that we would have seen. A similar attempt would have been seen throughout the selection process. The PNM was very early in the selection process. You would have seen a dynamic process in terms of, number one, a retaining of incumbents in marginal seats based on performance. And then number two, they would have also pivot whereby, even in stronghold seats, to bring what we will call a new generation of politicians or young politicians. And that would have taken place. So it will be seen if that same success that was seen at the local level in Maruga, will it translate to the wider Maruga? I was talking with a colleague and I'm saying it's like a battle of the teachers or the education system, because you have in San Fernando West, you have an educator in Dr. Dowland, and then you also have Ms. Atwater, another educator, who have that type of history within the constituency. So it's yet to be seen if that will translate, but it's a great process because what the PNM is facing is incumbency. They have at least three hurdles. One, the hurdle of being in office for 2 consecutive terms, and those 2 consecutive terms were tough terms. They weren't pleasurable terms. It wasn't an environment that was convenient for anyone to govern. So now trying to get a 3rd consecutive term in itself is a feat. And then number 2, when you talk about incumbency, you're talking about the incumbency of dealing with the economy, dealing with crime, dealing with employment. So these are key hurdles that the People's National Movement knew they had to surpass. And in the attempt of pivoting to a younger generation, pun intended, was an effort of pivoting the party to have a fighting chance in this election.
But as a behavioral pollster, is it that the message or the messaging of dealing with those hurdles, how do you grade that performance? And I say that because it's one thing to do. Sometimes a child doesn't know how much the parent has had to go through for them to have a certain level of comfort or discomfort. They just know that there are certain things that they want and can't get. But do you think that message has been shared or submitted? Do you think that there's been that level of efficiency in sharing that message?
I would say that there were a lot of missed opportunities in sharing that message. You see, there is no way a government could be in power for 9+ years and the message of the PNM in do nothing. How could that have stuck in the minds of the electorate? And the only way that type of messaging could have stuck, because the whole process of an election is a conversion exercise. That's what an election is about. How do you convert the minds of people to believe not just what you have done, but what you will do? And the mere fact such a notion could be lingering tells me there was a gap in how do you sell your success story, what has been accomplished. If you look in the energy sector, there is a success story that can be told. It's a factual story. The reorganization of the Atlantic LNG, that's a success story. But what I have seen and many governments struggle with this, is whenever you move from being a party, an organized party, and you move into governance, sometimes they find themselves between two places, which is the politics and the governance. And most times the politics suffer in an effort to achieve governance. So the party structure, in terms of the PR, selling what you are doing, selling it to your membership and to the body politics, sometimes that is missed. So from a grading perspective, I do agree with Dr. Mukesh, is that it is true the PNM found themselves more reactive than proactive in responding. I'll give you one example. They teach you in marketing, the worst thing for you to do is to use the messaging of your opponent. That's the worst thing to do. So when you talk about yellow is the code, you shouldn't say red is the word. Because whenever you mention that, it reminds people of the opposition's message. So it has what is called a multiplier effect. So if every time I have to say red is the word, it reminds me of what they are responding to. Yellow is the code. So you are actually promoting your opponent's brand implicitly. So from that perspective alone, I think they required a simplicity in messaging. People talk about Trumpian politics. One of the key things about Trump, and I've been told that, you know, the opposition has had some U.S. influence in their messaging for this election, is that whenever you're talking conversion, your message has to be simple. The simpler it is, the higher the conversion. If you have to say red, ready, and responsive, which is 3 conversion points, versus when everybody wins, those are 2 punchlines that people remember. And that for in itself, I think there's a lot of reworking to do. I'm not talking about the genuinity of the message. I'm talking about the conversion of the message. And that is something I think from a political communication, we need to examine more closely.
And it's something that you are getting all the time too. Even if you go online to get the manifesto, that's something that you need to deal with.
In fact, there was something viral going around. You found the advertising even in adult spaces. I'll just use the word adult spaces. It was even being advertised there. So I saw it just, you know, so then every space, it's being promoted in every space. As I said before, tonight we will know if the population moved from saturation to inundation, because when you are inundated with a message, you move from the subject, from the topic of the ad, which is the subject matter, to the sponsor of the ad. And that's what happened in the US politics, right? Donald Trump was outspent. And though people spend a lot of money in terms of their promotion, there is the possibility when you're inundated with a message, people will begin to have a negative feeling towards the person who's sponsoring the ad.
And
we will know if that has occurred.
And in terms of that inundation, even like in the adult space, you're wondering what kind of win or GT you get through people talking about. But right now, what we're going to do is go to the headquarters of the United National Congress. We have Ayana, who is waiting with someone in the wings. So, Ayana.
Good evening, DK, and good evening to the panel, and of course, good evening to Trinidad and Tobago. We are here at the UNC headquarters on Mulchan Sutran Road in Chaguanas. With me now, we have Peter Kanai, and he's the General Secretary of the United National Congress. And Mr. Kanai is going to give us some numbers that he has, some preliminary numbers. Good evening, Mr. Kanai. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening. Thank you. Well, yes, as you can see on the board there, well, first of all, I think you all would have run the declaration of the superior seat by the Honorable Political Leader, Mr. Skamla Prasad Bisesa. And we have figures coming in slowly at this point in time because counting is going on. But we do have some seats that are showing very positive signs. We have Vandana Mohit in Chaguanas East. That she is way ahead of her opponents. We have Nicholas Morris in Mayaro, who is also way ahead of his opponents. And then we have people like Dr. Gosain in Chaguanas West, Dr. Munilal, and so on. They are almost at the brink of declaring their seats. But so far, we are yet to receive figures in the battleground seats because, yeah, as you would expect, counting there would be tremendous. Right?
What is the feeling that you're getting from the executive, from your supporters?
Well, all our people are feeling quite buoyant. We have run a very clean, a very strategic, a very positive campaign. And we've been doing our homework. We've been in a running battle as well with the Elections and Boundaries Commission. Including today, I have had reason to dispatch several letters to the EBC because of irregularities that were cropping up all over the country in various constituencies, ranging from presiding and deputy presiding officers not signing or initialing ballots, or issues with police officers, and in one case, an issue in a polling station where there was no stationery for the EBC personnel to use, and that kind of thing, and many others. So all day today, I've been writing letters to the EBC on issues. But the polls are closed now. We are focused on winning this election, and I can assure you that we will be taking up these issues going forward, because we must get our electoral process properly done.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Kanai, and back to you, DK.
Thank you so much, Ayana Carter. We will continue to drop in as the situation allows. But even though the conversation has been going well, and we haven't even really spoken about swing states as yet, and we will continue to have that conversation. But one of the things that people have really kind of tuned into is to get the results. So we go to Sigoni Mohammed now to get some of those results as they are coming in.
All right, DK, some results are coming in. And as we head to Tobago East, first and foremost, currently we see the TPP, Tobago People's Party, taking the lead at this time. As you can see on your screen, the electorate there is just over 23,000. This area is considered a marginal seat. In the 2020 election, we saw Ayanna Webster Roy with 7,000 votes and the PDP's Watson Duke with just over 5,800 votes. TPP's David Thomas, though, is definitely making this race interesting as he takes the lead over these two in our preliminary figures, coming in at 1,589. That's David Thomas, ahead of Ayanna Webster Roy's 923 votes coming in there. Watson Duke, just over 100 votes at this time. Now, we do also have some data on some safe seats, which, as you just heard from the UNC camp, they are declaring in some cases, and also for the PNM leading in some areas. We're heading to Siparia now, where the UNC has taken a significant lead of 8,000 votes. That's Kamala Prasad-Bissessar. She is there at 95.65. That's the number of votes in the lead right now, ahead of Natasha Mohammed's 1921. And as we heard earlier, the UNC declaring that seat unofficially for us at this time. We're still waiting to see what's happening in that Siparia area. Of course, no votes coming in for Patriotic Front's Judy Sukdeo. Let's head over to Chaguanas West now. As the UNC camp, they were talking about Neil Gosine. So let's actually take a look at what the figure is happening there. And he is coming in at 6,200 votes. Winston Mahabir yet to get a vote in for the PNM. And clearly he has taken the lead here as well. In another safe seat or another safe area we're heading to at this point is Labre. And we're seeing that the PNM has actually taken the lead in this one. Randall Mitchell coming in at 968 votes. Clyde Elder for the UNC, just about 300 votes shy of where he is at this time. Carla Garcia for the Patriotic Front, yet to get a vote counted in there. Now, we are looking at a marginal seat, one of the battlegrounds for Chaguanas East. And at this time, what we do know is that the UNC's Vandana Mohit, we heard that they are declaring that seat from the UNC camp. Vandana Mohit comes in with 3,145 votes in that seat. We understand from the PNM's camp that there is around 985 votes. This will be updated on our graphic as the evening progresses for Richie Sukai, so we'll see how it goes. There's a lot of things happening, DK. It is buzzing upstairs where we are in the results center. A lot of data coming in. and we are just waiting and standing by to give it to you as it comes to hand. Of course, checking and making sure that everything is up to board. We'll also be giving you a look at what else is happening in Tobago a little later on. So DK, that's what we have for you for now. The UNC again coming in with Chaguanas East and Siparia. The PNM safe seat of Labray still safe as it is right now, and we're waiting to see what happens with the other areas. DK, it's back to you.
Thank you so much, Sigonia. And if you say it's buzzing upstairs, I'm sure it can be buzzing as well at the headquarters of the NTA. So over now to Mahalia Joseph Wharton, who is speaking with a captain, Captain Gary Griffith. Mahalia?
Good evening, I'm Mahalia Joseph Wharton, and we are currently at the headquarters for the National Transformation Alliance, NTA, which is led by political leader Gary Griffith. Now, what I can say, we all know it's been a long day, but from the moment we arrived, we could sense that there is a family atmosphere here, as Mr. Griffith has been surrounded by his wife, his son, his daughter, his granddaughter, son-in-law, and of course, all of his supporters, and as well as his members. Now, Mr. Griffith is here with me right now. Good evening, Mr. Griffith.
Hi, good evening.
So what we want to find out from you, we know that this is actually the first general election that the NTA is contesting. Tell me, what are your thoughts at this point in time as results begin to flow in?
Well, definitely what it has shown is that, I mean, the country, they are not yet ready, yet again, for a third option. There are 14 other political parties other than the PNM, the UNC, and the TPP in Tobago. And I think with all 14, you're not seeing even a dent virtually. It does not in any way mean that the country, they do not appreciate the individuals. I mean, I can tell you the 16 candidates, I mean, I salute the 16 candidates of the NTA, excellent job. Most of them, if they go to any of the other major political parties, they would have done probably just as well, if not even better. So you can't, it's not to question their capability, it has to do with that base support. The base support, yet again, has proven, similar to the United States with the Republicans and Democrats, that base support is so strong that 99% of persons will always go back to the base support, whether it is the PNM or the UNC. And there's a reason for that. It is, you will hear for the next 5 years, whoever wins. I mean, right now it's very interesting, but you're going to hear for the next 5 years, the majority of the country criticizing both parties. And then when the time comes, they're going to go back to the PNM or the UNC. What we have done is nothing more other than give the country that other option. It started with the ONR in 1981. It went to the NAR in 1991, of which Kamala Prasad-Bissessar was part of, and they did not win a seat either. I think she lost a deposit. 2007 with the Congress of the People. 18 years later, we gave the country a third choice yet again. The country, I think what usually happens is that persons on both sides of the PNM and UNC, because of the fear factor that if I vote for this third party, it's because that party who I do not like to get in. That fear factor, that hate factor, whatever you call it, it will cause persons to go back into their home base, which is what has happened now. This is not in any way to discredit the PNM or the UNC. Hats off to both political parties and their leadership. They have held an excellent campaign, but again, it's always difficult for third parties when they have $150 million and we have just a couple $1,000 struggling. But as I said, the base support, it has held. All that we can do, I wish to take this opportunity to thank each and every candidate, supporter, member of the NTA. Hold your head up high. You have done your nation proud. We have given the country an opportunity, but the country has decided yet again they want to stick with their base support.
And I know you would have mentioned cost as a factor when it comes to campaigning. Are you satisfied that even with this challenge, that the NTA did its best when it came to the actual campaigning and being on the ground? Because I know that the NTA would have contested 17 of the 41 constituencies, which I guess is still no easy feat, especially since you're a party, just getting into the general election of things.
Oh no, definitely. Whereas we will be struggling to get a financier to give us $500 or $1,000. The other two major parties, they were getting checks of $5 to $10 million like that because they have been in government or previously in government. So when you give a contractor a $100 million contract, he's going to give you back $20, $30 million as a thank you and remember me. And that's what makes it very difficult. But having said that, you'd have gone on ChatGPT, you'd have seen that the NTA, our manifesto, which was really earlier, transformation roadmap was the number one. It defeated all the others. How we were able to present ourselves, the charisma, the passion, the patriotism that you would have seen of our candidates, it was unbelievable. So we have done well. But again, the campaign financing was always going to be difficult. But as I said, the country is not ready, and it seems that they will never be ready for a third choice. It is always going to be the ketchup or the mustard.
And as we wrap up, what I'd really like to find out is what's next for the NTA?
Well, that remains to be seen. This is not a Gary Griffith party. The party is the rank and file of all of those persons who are in that bridge constituency, that where they call it the bridge constituency, the third party, whatever. So it is for the party to decide. I think there's still an opportunity for that bridge constituency of a third party. I do not know what the future holds for myself as Gary Griffith, where it is that we need to change leadership. And that's my style. If it is that I led the party and we have been unable to crack that opportunity to get into government, do I need to reconsider someone else taking over? Do I need to continue towards the NTA? Do I need to find another avenue to serve my country? I will ask that through my prayers to my God, speaking to my family, my friends, and definitely the rank and file of the National Transformation Alliance. They put us where we are. I wish to thank each and every one of you all for having the faith in me. I walk the length and breadth of Aranguez St. Joseph, and not one person showed any degree of criticism, animosity, and I think most of the candidates of the NTA as well. So it shows that the country loves the NTA. Nobody has a problem with us, but to stain their finger to put us in government, no. So thank you very much, and we will see what the future holds with the NTA in the very near future.
So there you've heard it from the political leader of the National Transformation Alliance. I'm Mahalia Joseph Wharton, reporting live from Mount Lambert at the party's headquarters.
Thank you so much, Mahalia Joseph Wharton. And if the first live interview that we had recently was a concession speech, I'm wondering if this is following that precedent, Dr. Basdeo. But even before you get into that, though, I want to say welcome once again. If you are tuning into this discussion, if you're tuning into the Race to the 21 via CSTV in Canada, very happy to have you join this very special broadcast. And actually, let me go to Mr. Ross. So Gary Griffith, he spoke about the populace not necessarily being ready for an option that was outside what he determined as ketchup or mustard. As somebody who has just said that you are going to drive in the vehicle, you might shift the rims, you might put on a flare kit, you'll do some work. Why do you think these two parties, these two groupings have the place on lock, as it were?
I cannot speak to the psychological effects of these parties, but I'll say this. If we look at the history, specifically of the People's National Movement, it's a party built on history. That base is not something that they cultivated last week. If we look at the history of all those little broken parties, DAC, TLP, Tapia House, and how they formed, reformed, how Tobago joined, disjoined, how they formed the NAR, how they attempted several coalitions. And it's something that we have in a democracy, that people have the right to be able to move and change and shuck and jive. But there's two things that remain constant in this place, those two bases. For anyone to sit and try to figure out, well, how do we break these two bases? We're going to see now with the Patriotic Front, if they could break into that base. We saw the NTA attempted to do it. We saw that everyone keep running into this coalition because they realized, wait a minute, there's a 15-year project. This is not just a 15-year project. This is a big money project. So at the end of the day, my expectation is that the bases will remain intact. And you will see it when we start to speak about those marginal seats. And as marginal as they are, with a sliver of 1,000 voters across 5 seats. Just 1,000 each. One of them has 1,500. 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000. And that is what's going to determine how tonight goes. All this excitement that's broken hearts when people seeing who win in which seat and who find front. Because you don't have the actual PD data that tells you that based on how the seat itself is structured, that the PD results that are coming in are showing that this team is leading when in fact they may not even win the night. But the voters are very much entrenched in those two camps. A classic example, and it's good that you had my good friend Rushton Parry on. Notwithstanding how the people in Miara feel about the fact that Rushton is not their UNC representative, they're still gonna vote for their UNC representative. And you saw that when he challenged the leader for leadership, he got almost no support in his own party. Everybody has their base. Even within your own party, you have your own base. And these parties, we may have to say, don't really like change. But then when we look to United States, where we always like to make comparisons, we have the Democrats and the Republicans, and we have the other little parties on the side, Green Party, whichever party. But you see, it's the same thing. The two main parties always dominate. And maybe the type of politics we have don't have room for too many other parties. I think one difference we may see maybe in Tobago. And then, based on the preliminary information and results I'm seeing, maybe it's the same thing. They only have room for two. And they may well make a decision that they're going to abandon the PDP and take all their PDP eggs and throw it in the TPP basket. And tonight is going to be a telling story and a marker as to if there really is room for third parties. I would say there's none.
And I want to get back to that and involve the other panelists in how it is we're doing that. Because even when you look at the fact because you talk about 15 years and there's a precedent that some individuals may not like in terms of what can happen almost like with regularity every 15 years at this point in time. And I guess we'll get into that as well. But we do so when we return from this break. Stay with us. Race to 21. We come back after this.
Tonight, as the nation waits, know that at Standard, you've always made the right choice. We believe everyone deserves a beautiful, comfortable home. At Standard, we bring you the best deals for everyday living. Appliances, furniture, electronics, because at Standard, when it comes to price, nobody beats us. Make the winning choice for your home. Shop in store or online at standardtt.com.
Football is back, and with it, sporting fans, so is the 12th man. It's new, it's different, it's interactive, and most of all, it's fun. This is Mikey Holding, giving a big shout out to the one and only Andre Errol Baptiste, the original 12th man, back again for a record-breaking 5th season on TTT. Join and share in the smiles and more on the 12th man.
Welcome back to Race to 21. One of the things I want to ask you, Dr. Basdeo, and once again jumping off the premise that there has been a concerted campaign from 2015, and adding that to what Mr. Ross would have just said, to crack into a base is not something that happens overnight. How do we look at different parties getting in and with the understanding that this is something that will take time?
The 2020 election results clearly demonstrated that there was no room for third parties. Clearly demonstrated that the electorate basically moved back into their respective camps. And between 2020 and 2025, we can see maybe the only third party that may emerge will be one of the parties in Tobago. If the TPP is successful in Tobago, they may emerge as a third party. Mr. Griffith spoke about, it was like a concession, he conceded to the results tonight. But when we look back at Mr. Griffith, he tactfully only placed candidates in 17 constituencies. So if from the onset we ask ourselves, was Mr. Griffith, was he serious about forming government? You need 21 to form a government. 17 is not going to give you government. So the question is that why 17 and not 21? If you're deciding you want to form the government, then 21 is always the magic figure. But he chose 17, and he placed himself in one of the what we call the marginal constituencies, which was around with St. Joseph. So it was a politically tactful move on his part. But now that we have what we have seen so far, we have Ms. Pandey, who contested 37 seats, and the night will show well whether or not what will be her vote tally. We still have to see the vote tally in St. Joseph and the other constituencies that the NTA would have actually had candidates. So this is now what is put just to know that you're quite correct. Mr. Ross is quite correct. We have basically reverted back to where we started in 2020. That you basically have two major political parties. And it could also explain why in the lead up to this general election, in the weeks, you had these smaller parties, and I speak in the context of the trade union movement, not as a political party, but the trade union movement having candidates in Labre and in Point Fortin, but registered under a UNC ticket. You have the COP joining with the UNC. It's clear that the smaller parties recognized for them to go into this. There is, yes, you must have the resources to get into this race, but at the same time recognizing that there is two major parties in the race. And you have to be either associated with one of the two political parties. That is what
it's not going to happen with the PNM, because
not.
the PNM...
They have a philosophy, and I understand their philosophy, win alone and lose alone. That has been their philosophy since all the way back to 1956, and it has not changed. So this is where we are at this point in time.
But if you think that but if we go on the premise that there's only that space for two parties, why bother to try to form a coalition, as it was termed this time around, and be on the outside of one of those two major players?
Well, in this case, although a coalition of interest was formed with the UNC, with other smaller political parties and the trade union movement, members of the trade union movement, and also when we think in the context of the COP, PEP, and so forth, Mr. Griffith has been, since the local government election of 23, one would understand that there was an understanding for the local government election, and that he did contest. There was a sharing of electoral districts in the 2023 local government election, the result of which Mr. Griffith basically won the right to actually identify an alderman for the Diego Martin Regional Corporation. But as we get into today, what we realize is that he has lost his alderman, right? He has lost his alderman, literally. So this is where we are at. So it appears that there had been, let's say, maybe stumbling blocks along the way, that they could not form an agreement onto what they call a viable accommodation.
It also makes me want to ask, because the precedent of looking at what is happening in the United States and taking precedent, modeling some of that behavior, when we look at someone like Kamala Harris and Bernie Sanders and different approaches, is it a matter of saying, okay, well, this is what someone is coming with, and we see how it's affecting the people that they are giving this message to? Do we take some of that and bring it into our messaging? Do we take some of that and put it into our policies? If success is something that is strategic and built out, how do we do things like that, Mr. Henry?
Well, let's be clear. When we talk about a partnership and an interest, it was an admission for the present opposition of one, yes, there is the existence of two dominant parties, but also number two, that In this cycle, they made a strategic decision of one, you have to hunt for your own political lunch. So as a party, if you don't have a base, you're coming into my tent. You're not bringing, you may be a party in name or in symbol. You saw the difference in the partnership whereby, for instance, Aaron McLeod, he was key in hammering together that Fyzabad Accord. And he was placed in a stronghold seat, which is Pointe-a-Pierre, which showed that the trade union movement not only brought strategic support to the partnership, but brought people to the partnership. So the key question here is, this election cycle wasn't about the bases. This election cycle was, how do I attend to the margins? And the margins is the non-voters, the disengaged voters. Sometimes we call them swing voters. These are people who will only come out for an election to vote out our government and they disappear. So this election was strategically designed. How do I engage, number one, the non-voters, swing voters, and number two, how do I suppress my opponent's base? So these were the two things that were happening simultaneously. So when my friend talked about black facing of their political strategy, it was an attempt, how do I draw those non-voters who are disenchanted to come out and vote against the government? And then secondly, how do I suppress my opponent's base by presenting nothing has been done? Why do you choose the present status quo? So that in itself was its strategy. And I will conclude by saying this. We saw polls being presented, NACTA polls, Hamed Ghani polls, and both all said something similar. It's tight. It's a deadlock. And I will say this: in polling, if you are a party that presents a strong alternative, and you've been campaigning since 2015, and the population is still hesitant, it says two things. One, there is a hesitation to embrace your brand publicly. That's number one. And then number two, it also speaks to the alternative, which is the present government has presented something that people aren't as hesitant to leave. So when you look at the results that we are seeing presently, you're seeing the strongholds will play itself out. We're seeing now in Tobago, TPP is having edge in Tobago East. So it tells me, even if this election comes on to like a 2021, it tells me clearly from a communication perspective and a strategy perspective that the current opposition was not able to bring that tidal wave into an election process. Because if you were able to prosecute that case, there would be no poll saying it's a tight race. And then secondly, it tells that brand PNM, if we have to look at it from that perspective, is not only institutional, but from itself has a case to prosecute to the wider population. And that itself will be played out in the end result today.
And I'm trying not to speak about marginals here, gentlemen, but we're going to get into it momentarily. But before we do that, though, we are heading to Tobago, where Carecia Douglas is at the PNM headquarters in Scarborough. I think we may also, at some point in time, be able to speak with Gail Thomas at the TPP headquarters, which is a stone's throw away. But right now, we are... But even before that, though, Sigoni, you have some results for us, please, and thank you.
All right, DK, so we are taking a look at what's happening in the Tunapuna area. One of those battleground spots, we do see Roger Alexander under the UNC in the lead at this time, 33-88 ahead of Esmond Ford's 27-86. These votes coming in hot and heavy. We are still checking to see what is happening at this time as we move over to another area. So let's take a look at what else is going on. San Fernando West, this one in particular, we do see the UNC in the lead, just over 500 votes coming in ahead of the PNM's Faris Al-Rawi. So take note where this one is concerned. Still some early voting happening within this particular area as well. So we'll see how that is working out. But the UNC is clearly in the lead at the the moment. The UNC is also in the lead in another area. Let's head to Mayaro, and if we do have Rashdan Pare on the line, maybe he can speak to this one with how this is going to swing, DK, and give us some more insight. But we do have the UNC's Wilfred Morris in the lead at this time. 7,000 votes, just over that. Beatrice Bridgelal for the PNM coming in just over 2,000 votes. And this is a particular area where we're seeing about 28 or 29,000 people for the electorate in Mayaro at this time. Now, we do also have some more information that is coming out. This is within the early stages, however, for these votes coming in for Toko Sangre Grande in particular. We do have Roger Monroe for the PNM ahead of Wayne Sturge for the United National Congress. So take note, again, no votes coming in yet for the NTA or the Patriotic Front at this time, but these are the preliminary results that we do have for you, and we will be giving you some more information as it comes. We are watching those marginal seats that you're talking about, but Mayaro, we're definitely taking note as to where that one is going, and maybe you guys can stay at a conversation to see what's going to happen in that particular area, DK, as we go through the next couple of minutes. So that's what we have for you for now.
Thank you. Even before we steer the conversation in that direction, we are going to Tobago, where Caricia Douglas is waiting to give us some information. Caricia?
We are here live at the People's National Movement's headquarters, Tobago headquarters in Wilson Road, Scarborough. It's an interesting night as the numbers have been coming in quite slowly. However, based on what we're seeing here, we have two screens bringing us updates as numbers coming from the polling station. Looking at particularly Tobago East, the Tobago People's Party candidate David Thomas is actually ahead with 3,199 votes, while the PNM's Ayanna Webster Roy has amassed thus far 2,032 votes. In Tobago West, it has been very, very tight. A short moment ago, Mr. Sampson would have he would have received 3,925 compared to Mrs. Lewis 3,922. But as we speak currently, the numbers indicate Mr. Sampson has amassed 4,299 votes, whereas Mrs. Lewis has amassed 4,342 votes. It's a very, very tight one in Tobago West in particular, but in Tobago East, the TPP is leading right now at the PNM's headquarters. It's very, very quiet. Not many supporters are here, but we are monitoring the numbers, and we will bring you updates as they come to us here at PNM headquarters in Tobago. And we now will take you to the TPP's camp at Port Moore, where Gail is going to bring us some live updates.
We are here at the Port Mall in Scarborough, where the TPP's head office is located. At the moment, the atmosphere here is very, persons are very excited. The executive and the persons who have already started coming out to support the party, they are very excited that the numbers are clearly showing a victory for the TPP's David Thomas in the east of Tobago. So far, the numbers that we have are 1,589 votes. That's the tally from the figures that have come in from the various polling stations across Tobago East. So far, 1,589 for David Thomas of the TPP, PNM 917, and the PDP's Watson Duke 106. And in the West, the figures are very close for the PNM's Shamfa Kojo and the TPP's Joel Sampson. Here with us, though, we have the chairman of the Tobago People's Party, Miss Anne Natasha Second. Good evening, Miss Second.
Good evening.
Right, tell us, how do you feel? Because so far the numbers clearly are showing victory, particularly in the east for the TPP. Tell us a little bit about how you feel so far.
So far, we are quite excited. We feel quite satisfied that we have done well given the short election period. Our party is well structured, and we would have come up with our election day machinery in a short period of time, reflecting the talents that rest here in Tobago. So we are very, very excited, very optimistic about our numbers. As you have said, a number of the polling stations where the results came in for David Thomas, he was ahead of the incumbent. And so we continue to look at those numbers. We are very excited in the camp, very cautiously excited, and we're looking forward to, the success that we think that we are achieving at this point in time. Our political leader, we are waiting his arrival. He'll be here at around 10 to 30 to address the nation.
All right, so obviously I'm sure you are pleased that the Tobago public, the voters, have listened to the message that you would have been giving out over the past the month so far. What do you want to say to the public?
I want to say congratulations for coming out to the polls in your numbers, listening to the message, taking your time, separating the issues that are national concerns from the issues that are local concerns. Everyone did their part. Tobago can look forward to this blue wave, this
And while that is happening, just before we had that challenge in transmission, one of the points I want to look at, gentlemen, making the difference between local concerns and national concerns. And talk to me a little bit about that, Mr. Ross.
It's one of the issues you see in Trinidad and Tobago is the citizenry not getting a clear message as to what falls under local gov and what falls on central gov. A classic example is, for example, let's take one of the marginals we're going to be discussing at some point in time, which is Moruga. Moruga falls under, even if it's under the People's National Movement at any point in time, still will be in a local gov scenario where it's under United National Congress. And all those local government issues, side roads, garbage collection, cleaning drains, whenever you have the incumbent government in power, a lot of the citizenry see it as if that is their responsibility and it's not being done. So that is what becomes the danger of incumbency. So you're the incumbent government, you're not responsible for the local government in that area, but you still get blamed for it. So we still have a long way to go to educate the population as to who's responsible for what, but at the same time, the central government should take it upon themselves to recognize where there's that issue and pick up those pieces so that you are going to get blamed for it, so you might as well sort it out.
And one of the things that we found that the Minister of Rural Development, Local Government talking about is that you find, to your point, you find these situations where you have so many orphan roads. It's like one person saying, but it's not mine, and the other person saying, no, but it's not my responsibility. And while the grass is growing, the horse is starving certain ways.
But orphan roads is another issue by itself, you know. And as the word orphan tells you, nobody owns it. So you've got the Ministry of Works and Transport, which is central government. You've got local government, and you've got all the local government institutions. Then you have the Ministry of Agriculture. And an orphan road is actually a road that falls under none of them. That's the actual definition of an orphan road. So that's something that has to be addressed legislatively, where you've got to sit and ensure that the roads are properly assigned and the population is aware as to who's responsible for that road. But that awareness has been lacking. We've done local government consultation. We've tried to reform local government. We've gotten partway there, but not fully there yet. But we have a lot of work to do. And that is one of the things where a lot of times when you look at the scenarios in Trinidad and Tobago, but more so in Trinidad I can speak to, is that understanding as to where we came from and where we are and how far we still have to go and how young this nation actually is. It is so young that you'll find that we still have orphan roads. If we weren't young, we would not have orphan roads. And you'd find that everybody in the country would know who's responsible for which road. But alas, we have a lot of work to do.
How do we address that work in a manner that sometimes will take us past an election cycle, Mr. Henry?
The truth is, I think that dichotomy and confusion is used for political advantage. And the only way that could be solved is through one, transparency, because as Mr. Ross just indicated, tossing the ball between that's local government, that's central government, when it's identified as local government, they say we have no money. Then central government say you have unspent balances. Why aren't you using it? So that is usually done for political mileage and is intentionally done like that. For instance, if we look at the Tobago experience, presently in the Tobago experience, you have persons who are confusing central government issues and the THA responsibilities. And whenever that is not clear, there's a convenient blame. If something isn't done, we say, well, it's central government.
But I will get blamed if we don't actually go to Sunalala at this point in time. So that is what we are going to do, going to Sunalala at the PNM headquarters.
We have very preliminary numbers here so far. And we are not in a position to declare any seats whatsoever. We are in the lead in a number of seats. However, in 20 minutes' time, our political leader and members of our leadership will come and address you and answer all questions that you may have. So at 10 p.m., you can look forward to members of our leadership coming out here this evening to speak with you further. If you have any preliminary questions that I may be able to answer, I will be very happy to do so, but our leadership will come and give you answers at 10 p.m. Mr. Brown. Yes? So for instance, Arima, which is a traditional PNM stronghold, in our preliminary numbers here, we have 669 votes. And we can't declare a seat on 669 votes. The other parties have 69 votes, for instance. So we will not be able to declare that seat because we anticipate there will probably be 10 more thousand votes to come forward here to be cast. So. Yes. We have had in 2020, because of the COVID, things had been very slow as well. So I'm not surprised that information is still slow in coming in. This is not an anomaly. Information has been traditionally slow to come in. Yes. Yes. So based on this, for instance, in Maruga, Tabelon, the two numbers, one party has 3,600, one party has 3,800. So we can't make any declaration on that. But as I said, it's very early still. Our numbers are coming in. We are also monitoring the EBC site to compare with the numbers that are coming in from our respective agents. But at 10 o'clock, the leadership of the party will address all of you. Yes? Okay? Thank you all so very, very much.
Thank you very much, and food for thought, gentlemen. And what Mrs. Zama, one of the things that she would have spoken about is not necessarily conceding, not necessarily having coming to a determinant factor because of the numbers that are coming in or the numbers that have not come in. Speak a little bit about polling divisions, please, Mr. Ross, because you in an answer you gave before, you said PD plenty. But in terms of what are some of the implications for the polling divisions, where they're located, how it is they come in?
See, one of the things we have to understand when we're receiving data is we have to understand where that data is coming from. So I'll give you an easy example. If you look at a map of Trinidad, on the entire eastern side of Trinidad, you have 4 seats taking up essentially more than 1/3 of the landmass of Trinidad. Many people don't know that. And you start at the north, you got Toco, Sandy Grande. When you look at Toco, that's a PNM stronghold, Sandy Grande, UNC stronghold. Kumoto Manslina, La Hoqueta Talparo. You see that double name? There's a UNC portion and a PNM portion of that. When you go to Mayaro, it's not really Mayaro. It's Rio Clara Mayaro. So sometimes you can see 5,000 votes for UNC, 1,000 for PNM, and then you say, wait a minute, all those votes are actually coming from the Rio Claro, Biche, Pool area. You still haven't counted Mayaro, Ottawa, and Guayaguayari. And the same thing when you go to Moruga Tableland. It's not really Moruga Tableland. It's Moruga Tableland, Barakpo. And if you count a lot of the votes in Barakpo, you may notice that you're way ahead. And then when you start to count those votes in the PNM stronghold PDs, Laloon, Marak, Basté, etc., it starts to shift. So sometimes you have to be careful not to call it too early, and you've got to also know which PDs are actually being counted in that pool. The one thing I would like to say specifically to Moruga, because based on the direction that I'm hearing we head in tonight, that's the one pull-out seat that has to pull us out. But that pull-out will come only when a candidate gets close to 11,000 votes. Because historically, those two, the candidate in that seat will get at least 10,000 each. So we got to be really looking at the numbers from a holistic perspective and with the reality of which PDs are the ones that are reporting, totally counted and coming in.
I want to talk about implications a little bit, Dr. Basdeo. What are some potential implications if the anchor holds in Tobago?
Well, from all indication that we're getting from Tobago, it seems like the anchor has dropped, and it is holding in Tobago. And it's not only in the seat that I would think would be Tobago East, it also may extend to Tobago West. So we have to see in the next hour whether or not the announcement is made that the TPP has won the 2 Tobago seats. Now, what's the implication of that happening? The implication is that the PNM has 22 seats, 2 of which is Tobago East and West. If they lose the 2 Tobago seats, it means they're down to 20. Now it comes back down to what Mr. Ross is saying. It's not only Moruga Tableland you have to watch. You have to also watch the other seats in the corridor. You have to watch St. Joseph, you have to watch Tunapuna, you have to watch La Hoqueta Talparo, you have to watch Toco Grande. So you're talking about 4 other marginals on the corridor that is also have to be factored in. But it is clear that what we are seeing is that as the night progresses, I think we are waiting to see what the PNM leadership will tell us at 10 o'clock. I think we all would be eager to hear what they will come out and say at 10 o'clock.
Mr. Henry, is there a marginal that you're watching and why? And I asked that question after what it is you were going to share.
Okay. Well, to put it simply, whenever you see the national outlay in terms of the turnout, marginal seats usually outperform the national voter turnout. And if that provides itself in this election cycle, as I was saying before, the UNC would have made a strategic decision of playing on the margins. The word a coalition of interests is a marketing term that we use. It's called verticals. What verticals do I get to bring in to the election process to expand my margins? So what are the verticals they decided to do? You have Labour is one vertical that is coming into the election process to push the margins. They may not have had it in a political vehicle, but they have it as a constituent. So when you hear PSA coming in, you hear people try to disavow, hey, well, our union did not take an official position, withdrawals are taking place. But the attempt, in its essence, was to bring persons into the margins to expand. And once that happens, once one marginal falls, it's a domino effect because many of these seats have a similar composition. And if that composition holds, it's highly unlikely you would see, to your question, a marginal in one part of the east-west corridor fall and the other holds. It's usually a ripple effect. So we need to see what happens. For instance, when I look at Tunapuna, for example, that seat, the current MP, he has been falling consistently each election cycle. And the UNC would have been able to have about 3.99% swing in that voter count. So if that decline would have continued, you would have seen that candidate most likely probably winning by probably 400 votes. If you're talking about 400 votes in a tight election, that's on the margins of a high possibility of losing that seat. And if that is the case, that could be translated in St. Joseph, where that candidate would have won by plus 800 votes, and so on and so on. So once we see that swing continues, there's a high probability that it will duplicate itself throughout the east-west corridor.
I want to ask you the same question, Mr. Ross. Is there a marginal that you're looking at in particular? If so, why?
I'm looking specifically. Now, I want to be careful as to what we call marginals. So there's the traditional marginal, which is those 5, which is now Claxton Bay, Moruga, Barataria Sawa, Shogunas East, and which one did I leave?
San Fernando.
No, I don't count San Fernando as a marginal. So there's that group of 5 marginals, and there's the other group of 6 semi-marginals. And I use the word semi deliberately because the 5 has a vote differential count every single election cycle about between 1,000 and 1,500 fixed. There's another group that has a differential closer to 2,500 and 3,000. That La Hoqueta Talparo. So this swing ain't no small swing. If you're talking about a Tunapuna swing, that ain't no small swing. So stop this marginal talk. That's a big swing. A small swing is that 1,500, 1,000. 3,000 votes, that's a massive swing. It's not small. Tobago, the numbers might be smaller, but a swing in Tobago is a big swing. Why? Because it's a smaller place. These seats where you have 30,000 voters, every seat in this country, in Trinidad specifically, has 30,000 voters, right? And you're looking at swings of 1,500 among a voter turnout of around 70%. It's 20,000 people voting, and you have 1,500 votes determining where the election is going to go. In the particular case of the People's National Movement, the ability to get Moruga, so that's the seat, is what's going to determine how we would have performed. Because if we happen to have lost 2 others, we would hold up. That's the issue. If you cannot get Moruga, and what's even worse about not being able to get Moruga is go back and look at the local government results. We are winning, supposedly. Handsomely. When we talk about incumbency, you're looking at PNM is in government, so we're the incumbent government, but the incumbent MP is a UNC MP. So she also has the burden of incumbency, not just us. And yet, we went into Moruga and captured a local government seat that we normally wouldn't capture. And if you go look, don't look at just the one we won, look at the ones we didn't win. We handsomely shrunk the UNC majority in most of those local government seats. So it said that we were on the upswing. That upswing should have translated or should translate into a win. And I'm going to add one more thing to the pot. You had also pointed out about educators. The previous 2 members of parliament for Moruga were educators, Dr. Francis, Mr. Dikoto, and the PNM candidate today is an educator. 30 years, meaning she would have taught most of those children, their parents, and probably their grandparents, depending on the age they're at. If we lose, it's going to be a hard pill to swallow. But it may speak to more than just Moruga, but it may speak not to the race that we ran, but it will speak to what I had alluded to earlier. When you have 5 years to study for an exam, is what you're learning during that 5 years, and then you have your 5-week cram period. If you didn't learn nothing for 5 years, it's difficult to cram in 5 weeks. But if you had picked up some things and fixed some things and do some things in that 5 years, it might have been an easier one to come now at this point and sort it out. But when we look at trends as well in Tobago, go back and look at the data. The data showed, inclusive of the PDP, that that party in Tobago was getting stronger. They were eroding the majority that the PNM had over time. And you yourself just alluded to the issue of Ezi in Tunapuna. The numbers were being eroded. And when you see numbers being eroded, you have to wake up and say, you know what, let's take action. What we could do to stem the tide of this erosion. In the last general election, 2020, the People's National Movement nationally lost 56,000 voters. I'm not guessing, that's the number. In the last local government election, in the 5 marginal constituencies, the People's National Movement, except for Chaguanas East, lost 10% of their voters and more. In some cases, 14%. These are facts. I'm not making up these numbers. They're there for who wants to go in and look at the data. And at the same time, they're going to say, you know what, it was COVID. But when you go and look at the UNC data, the UNC lost, on average, closer to 4% of their base during COVID in 2020. So if we don't take it serious about the erosion of the base and how to address that erosion, if we don't have a problem tonight, we're going to have a problem that we have to deal with sometime after tonight.
How do you work on your base to the point that you were sharing? How do you work on the base while is it appearing to work on the base while treating with everyone? Or is it a matter of treating with everyone and working on the base? How do you balance that, Dr. Basdale?
The question that is eluding us is the elephant in the room. And that elephant is, was the decision to step down as political leader and prime minister and have a decision to appoint Mr. Young as the prime minister, was that the correct decision? The end of tonight will determine this, whether that is the elephant in the room. Because at the end of the day, it will come back, because what Mr. Ross is talking about is a decline from 20, 23, and reach 25. So if within the PNM, that's the engine room, that this decline was present, it was significant decline that he is talking about, 14% in some instances, and the UNC is having a 3 to 4% decline. What we have to discuss now is that whether or not, if the result turns out as how the trend is taking place here, whether or not the question will be asked, and he's quite correct that the PNM will have to face the reality come tomorrow morning, because then it will be faced with the reality of the results as it turns out. If it loses the 2 Tobago seats, as what is being reported, if it loses the 2 Tobago seats, if it loses the La Horquetta seat, if it loses the St. Joseph seat, if it loses the Tunapuna seat, right? If the UNC holds to the Moruga seat, then what it will mean is that the UNC has retained their 19 seats from the 2020 general elections. Everything above that is gains. and everything there. So therefore, the PNM would have to go back into a discussion as to see how did they reach this position tomorrow morning.
What might be some of the factors in that discussion, Mr. Henry?
Well, it would be retrospective to Dr. Basdale's point. Was the decision of the resignation announcement of January 3rd, was that the best decision? If you look at the decisions that have to be made, I don't think it was a reactive decision. As a matter of fact, the political leader would have telegraphed that decision years ago.
Correct.
So I don't think it was reactive. As a matter of fact, how the party was reorganizing itself and reorienting itself, that was, I would call it a political matrix. It was being done in slow motion. It was seen a long time ago. The question is, what is usually debated is the process of how it was done. I think that's where the debate will be. Let's take, for instance, right now, Canada is having an election, and they faced a very unpopular prime minister in the person of Justin Trudeau. He had the ability to call an election. He prorogued Parliament. He held out. In fact, not prorogued Parliament. He held out the recess period. He held out until the tide with Donald Trump and the fight for tariffs. And then they held what was called their own internal elections for the Liberal Party, which brought up a Liberal leader through an electoral process. When that happened, the Liberals, their numbers were in the doldrums. And after that electoral process and the conflict with Trump, they rose in the polls. And when that rise took place, then an election was called. So the question would be, what were the internal polls that would have informed the now Prime Minister to call that election in such a short period of time? And two, in retrospect, would they have gained some support from an energized base, to your question, through an electoral process? Maybe in retrospect, politically, that might have been a much more strategic move, but is yet to be seen.
And I want to ask the question of you, Mr. Ross, and we'll do it after the break, though, but I'll ask the question now. If Dr. Basdale spoke about an elephant, I want to add another animal, whatever it is. Yes, the move from Dr. Rowley to Stuart Young, one, but also the move for Mr. Young to call the election in this time frame, this 6 weeks period. And I want to get your thoughts on that, but we do that after we take this break. Race to 21 is on. Stay with us. We continue after this.
Tonight, as the nation waits, know that at Standard, you've always made the right choice. We believe everyone deserves a beautiful, comfortable home. At Standard, we bring you the best deals for everyday living. Appliances, furniture, electronics, because at Standard, when it comes to price, nobody beats us. Make the winning choice for your home. Shop in store or online at standardtt.com.
We have the best fans in the world. You can't miss the passion of Trinbagonians at a sporting event. At some point, we all become the 12th man or woman. Season 5 of The 12th Man is back and better than ever on TTT with your one and only Andre Errol Batiste. Tune in every Thursday on TTT for the most informative and action-packed show on local television. This is Asha De Freitas, a professional athletic trainer, and in case you did not know, we are your specialists in healthcare coverage for the active population.
You are dearer to me than all the stars. So many wish but never reach. 'Cause when I'm falling and all the world seems dark, you help me find my peace. Oshun mi ba fishani. Oshun mi ba yeah. Oshun mi ba fishani. Arubita yeah 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 yeah
Welcome back to Race to 21. We have some figures for you. Sigoni Mohammed, talk to us. Or even before we get to that though, I asked the question, Mr. Ross, if one elephant in the room is the fact that there would have been a transition from Dr. Rowley to Mr. Young, what of the decision to call the election as soon as that transition took place?
What I would say is this. It's not for me to second guess that decision because I don't have all the information that led to them coming to that position. Even as a political party, we have a lot of internal polling. And sometimes you have to take certain actions based on the information you have, but the rest of the population and the rest of your political body may not have. In the particular case of how it unfolded, as was pointed out by one of the panelists a while ago, that may be a concern. It may have been an issue that may have led to what may be tonight's fallout. However, a lot of times you can go pull your data and see the trends. The Tobago trend is there, it exists. The 2010 to 2015 to 2020 to today's trend, it exists. So those decisions as one-off decisions may be based on internal data and trending. And they said, you know what, to stave off this, let's do this. Let's call what looked like a snap election because today we selected a prime minister and next day he called an election. And it may in some case be a strategic move. If we win, somebody say that was a great move. In hindsight, people could say all kind of things, right? But at the end of the day, it's who has to captain that ship has to make those decisions. And you stand by the decisions you make at the end of the day, because the end of the day will be sometime tonight. And I guess shortly we'll figure out how, and we can go back and look and do a bunch of post-mortem and hindsight 50-50 and all that stuff. But I firmly believe in respecting that decision because we don't know what drove that decision. The end results is a different thing and it may not be because of that decision. We may not be able to point only at that. But I believe in data and the data obviously will tell a more fuller story.
And if you're looking at those trends, Dr. Harris, welcome back to the panel. What are some of the movements or what are some of the actions to stem the tide? What are some of the things that you would like to see if there's that drop-off that Mr. Ross is talking about in terms of thousands? It's 56,000, you said?
56,000 between 2015 and 2020.
What are some of those things that you would want to see to cauterize that?
So I think that just to follow up on the conversation from before, I think to try to pin either which way the coin falls tonight on any one particular thing is impossible, because obviously, is Dr. Rowley stepping down, Stuart Young becoming the Prime Minister, but also if you look at the numbers, as Mr. Ross was saying, we have to think about, as the PNM, how do you keep your base energized? And I think that's fundamentally the problem, and just trying to sit back and try to understand what has been going wrong in the last 10 or 5 years, right? But this is not to say that the UNC isn't energizing their base in a way that, we have to think about what is this we can learn from the data, but also not just the big data, but the stories. And I think that, so I'm a quantitative person, and oftentimes we get trapped in just looking at the big numbers and what the polls are saying. But it is most helpful to just talk to people on the ground, and then you get a feel of what the real issues are. And I think if we were paying more attention to the ground, and this is not just the PNM, this is the UNC, the Patriotic Front, the TPP, if we pay attention to the issues on the ground, then we're able to move with the population in terms of what they care about. So I think that's the starting point. And just thinking about from ground up, how do we hear people out? And not hear people out during the election, because I think the PNM did fantastic in terms of the walk-in. The walks that the PNM candidates did, they were all over. I think Michaela Pandey also did really well, because she's been walking for a while, and she walked the entire country across maybe about a year and a half or so. But I think that has to be part of the norm, that sort of always on the ground communication with the constituents. And there are some good examples. Even like if we think about the Honorable Penelope Beckel, she's fantastic in keeping in touch with her constituency and understanding what's going on the ground. So we can learn lessons from like one person, but just in terms of energizing the base. And it's difficult when you're the incumbent party to do that. And we've seen it. We've seen it with the Democrats. We've seen it in the UK with the Conservative Party. But thinking about those lessons, and I think any sitting government should know that and should be thinking about energizing the base while they're in government and not in the run-up to the election.
And I want to continue that train of thought with you, please, Dr. Basdeo, in the sense that certain ways it feels as though the United National Congress has a base that can be described as a little more stable. So it doesn't necessarily shift as much, as opposed to one for the People's National Movement, where it's easier to find someone who may not necessarily go out, or they may withhold a vote, or they may vote for another party. But even before we get to that, though, I think we have some results. So we get that from you now. Thank you, Sigone.
All right, DK. All right, so we do have some results coming in, and we're taking a look at what's going on in Tobago at this time. So if we just move a little bit into what's going on for Tobago East at this point, we see some very interesting results coming out from TPP's David Thomas. 4,075 votes coming in there, ahead of Ayanna Webster Roy with just over 2,600 votes coming in. Watson Duke making a small dent in what's happening in Tobago East at this time at 381 votes. If we take a look at what else is happening at this point, because it seems as though Tobago is going blue, we're also seeing something similar in Tobago West, but we'll get to that shortly. What we want to do is move our attention to La Hokata Talparo at this point. And if we take a look at what's going on for this particular area, Foster Cummings is just behind the UNC at this time. The area usually sees a voter turnout between 16 to 17,000 people. So right now, what we're looking at is just over 10,000 people voting in this particular area in La Joqueta, Talparo. Foster Cummings again just behind the UNC. Now the UNC camp says it is comfortably in the lead in certain areas, and they're particularly looking at Barataria San Juan, where Saddam Hussein is in the lead by just over 4,000 or around 4,000 votes ahead. This is a marginal seat and one of the battlegrounds that we will be monitoring as well. We are seeing for the PNM 3,000, just over 3,000 votes coming in there. And you'll notice that the NTA and the Patriotic Front have yet to register votes in these areas. Now, we also have a bit of areas that the UNC at this point are looking at closely, and they have their leading candidates, such as Claxton Bay, formerly Pointe-a-Pierre, which is seeing a UNC taking the lead, and the UNC camp claiming that there were no dents being made in these particular areas. Now, we do have on screen for you Tobago West. And again, what you're seeing, Tobago West turning a bit blue at this time, but it is a close call, just about 20 votes or so between the TPP and Shamfa Cudjoe for the PNM there. Very close where this one is concerned, and we will be monitoring that. We also see some of the other candidates, very small numbers being registered at this time for Tobago West as the votes continue to count. Another safe seat that we are looking at, well, that the UNC rather has declared unofficially, is the Caroni Central area, which saw David Lee in the lead at that time. The UNC candidate ahead, that UNC candidate rather ahead for both the PNM and the Patriotic Fronts. Both of them have Husseins in that running. So we continue to see what's happening. At this point, Tobago turning a bit blue, DK, but it is still close to tell what's happening with Tobago West. So we'll see what goes on there. It's over to you.
Thank you very much, Sigoni. At this point in time, we go to the headquarters of the People's National Movement, where we were promised the political leader at 10, and we see him on stage.
I am here at Balize House with my colleagues, Chairman of the party, Stuart Young, Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. I have on my left Deputy Political Leader, Ransin Onan, who was the campaign manager, and I have here the Mayor of Port of Spain, Alderman Chinua Alin. Tonight is not a good night for the PNM, but it might be a good night for Trinidad and Tobago. From all reports, we have conducted an election. Things have gone very well with the processes. The results are coming in now. And from what we have coming into Balize House, it is clear at this time that we have lost the election. So this press conference is what we do. We've done it before, conceding defeat on election night, but tomorrow is a new day. We've had to concede on the night of December 1986. We conceded in 1995. And we conceded in 2010. So this 70-year-old party, sometimes you win, sometimes you don't win. Tonight is one of those nights where, surprisingly, we have not done very well in the general election. But as we know how to do it, from tomorrow, the PNM will begin to prepare itself for the next call within the next 60 months. We wish all the winners well, because our country is now in their hands. From the reports that we have in our hand, it appears as though if the trends hold, the PNM will end up with an opposition in the order of 10 or 12 seats. But we've come back from 1 seat, we've come back from 3 seats, so 10 or 12 seats don't count us out. We will continue to remain faithful to our cause, which is to the interest and the service of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. The elections are over, changes will be made, promises to be kept, reviews to be done, rejuvenation to be had. One thing we're happy about is that the PNM will move expeditiously towards its new status as the opposition. The General Council will meet on Wednesday and will direct the elected members of the House as to who should be supported for the position of opposition leader. That is a position that we have held before, and even from there, we provide yeoman service to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I, as political leader, Prime Minister of recent vintage, but I still remain political leader, I did at an earlier time say to you, the media, that I've met with the general leadership of the party and indicate to them that I would not want to continue beyond the end of this year as political leader, and would, at their advice, vacate the post as soon as they would like me to, so as to facilitate the requisite convention. We will do that and will conduct our party business with dispatch, with honor, and with gusto in the coming weeks and months. So tonight, I simply want to say that we have kept the faith, we've run the course, and we still have some more running to do. If you have any questions to any of the three of us, we will take a few questions now, and we will go off to our new status.
At this stage, what would you consider
to
be...
Speak loudly, because you got a generator
At
there.
this stage, what would you consider to be the key factor or key factors that led to this particular result in this election?
Well, I think the population has chosen. One of the things that we have to be proud about is that in our system of governance, the management is chosen by the population. We went out there and competed for the position, and the population clearly, from Tobago to Point Fortin, the population has chosen the package of promises made by our political opponents. We can't argue with that. We put a package on the table, we put a direction on the table, we had a record behind us of the last 9.5 years. The population has chosen the package of promises. We said that we were a rejuvenated team offering, a new direction, a new chapter. The population chose those persons who they knew before, and on the basis of their past performance, they have been given the government again. We cannot argue with that. We are not going to argue with the electorate. As my grandmother has taught me, if good comes, it comes for all of us. And if bad comes, it comes for all of us. So while tonight at Balizé House there is no rejoicing, as we expected to, we are not despondent. We have not been here for 70 years by holding our heads down. As Mandela said, the problem is, and the shame is, when you go down, not to get up. The PNM has demonstrated when we are down, we come back with a vengeance. And 2025 will be no different.
You think that the issue of how you...
Media members only.
Just one other question.
Yeah, we have a question over here. Okay. That will be determined on Wednesday at Balizé House.
Dr. Oli, is there anything, they say hindsight is 2020, is there anything you would have done differently? I mean, going as far back as your resignation to now, is there anything at all you think the party could have done differently?
At this stage, of course, if we've lost, we didn't do what the electorate wanted, or we didn't have what the electorate wanted. But that is the system. Those who are going into office, they're not going forever. They're going for a specific period of time. And we now have to reflect on what we have, who we are, what we offer, and get ready for the next outing.
Dr. Rowling, you resigned as Prime Minister, but as PMM political leader, do you take personal accountability for this election loss?
My party contested the election, the People's National Movement. I was leader of the party. I was involved, and the political leader is still the leader of the party. And if you want to put all the blame on my shoulder, we're not in the blaming business here. We are in the rebuilding business.
Do you think the way in which the issue of the change in Prime Ministership from yourself to Mr. Young in any way was a factor in terms of voters, especially members of your party today?
Well, if you looked at what happened in Tunapuna on Saturday, you would have seen the PLM membership in their thousands supporting the position. The electorate is not the PLM membership. The electorate is much larger than the PLM membership. The turnout has not been a very high one, but of course There are issues, each person who votes have a reason. And I don't think there are very many votes cast based on the fact that I resigned. Because the resignation became history. We're looking forward. The PNM spoke about the future. The electorate was offered a package from the past. And we are now expecting that delivery starting from tomorrow.
Prime Minister Young, how do you feel in not having the ability to carry on some of the works that you have had in your operations?
Thank you very much for that question. The answer is obviously a bit disappointed. We have put forward what I believe was a very good proposal to the population. As I said only this morning, I believe we ran a very good campaign and a good fight, and we had quite a robust plan for the future. But the population has spoken, the electorate has spoken tonight, and we look forward to tomorrow morning. And the PNM is a strong party. We don't get here after 70 years, and from tomorrow morning, that's it. We're back, we rebuild. We will encourage all the young people to come forth. We have our experienced leaders with us still, and I can tell you something, from tomorrow morning you will see a strong PNM back on the road, back servicing the population of Trinidad and Tobago. And I certainly look forward to playing a part in that and a leadership role in that.
Mr. Young, there's a perception that once governments change, that the next party that comes in is just a clean sweep and they just get rid of everything. Of the things that you would have accomplished during your time in Parliament, what do you think is the one thing that the UNC has to tell them, well, we don't touch that? What is the one thing you'll tell them not to touch?
The population will judge UNC. I don't think a lot of what we achieved, especially in the energy sector, and the population and those who've elected them today would see in the next few months, next couple of years, whether they are able to deliver it. But only time will tell.
Mr. Young, what do you have to say to your supporters here tonight who are leaving very disappointed?
Disappointment is part of life. Don't be despondent. You still have a young person, not only young in name, and a person continues to be more than willing, ready and able to continue fighting for Trinidad and Tobago. I have won my seat, so I will still be there in Parliament, and believe you me, Trinidad and Tobago, despite tonight, I will fight for Trinidad and Tobago, and this party will fight for Trinidad and Tobago. And we will hold the UNC and that coalition of self-interest to the coals, and that is the new job. And you could rest assured, with every living breath in my body, I will carry out that fight for Trinidad and Tobago and the party.
How many seats have been declared by the PNM so far?
Those results are still coming in, but as the political leader says, we expect about between 10 and 13 seats at this time. What's that, sorry? I don't think, I don't think there's any such thing as a major seat. I don't think we've lost any PNM stronghold seat, but let's wait for the results to come in. As we all know, there are about 7 marginals here, and you have the 2 Tobago seats. So let's wait for the final results. The point is, once again, the PNM on principle has come forward. We are not dragging the country along, and we have come and we've declared a loss, and we're prepared. From tomorrow morning, we rebuild the party. All young people, you all still come on board, come and join us, and we carry on the fight for Trinidad and Tobago, albeit in a different position.
Mr. Young, we understand, well, the initial reports are that the PNM has lost Tobago. Your thoughts on, because you said it's in the promises and that kind of stuff that they would have made. What are your thoughts on losing Tobago?
That I hope for Tobago's sake, what they have elected tonight manages to deliver whatever has been promised to them. But as I say, the PNM will continue. We have 2 great young leaders in Tobago who led the charge. They were parliamentarians for the last 2 terms. And we will rebuild. As the political leader said before, this is not the first time the PNM has to rebuild. And one thing you see for sure, every time we rebuild, we come back stronger and with a lot more. We have declared it.
Minister Young, do you think that you bit off more than you could chew by accepting the task that former Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley would have given to you?
Absolutely not. I am not the type. I was not forced into anything. I put myself forward. I offered myself for leadership amongst my parliamentary caucus. I was given that responsibility. And anytime I'm given responsibility, whatever it is, I will always give my all and give my best. So no, not at all.
Dr. Rowley, do you think you chose the wrong person to
I didn't choose Mr. Young. The circumstances did. In my view, I only have one vote. And I had the experience of office, and I guided my party to a position, and he had the majority support in that position. He came to the electorate chose somebody else as Prime Minister. Leader of the PNM is now a different story. And even though tonight is not the result we were looking for, I see very many good possibilities in what we have done. So I have no regrets in supporting him as he offered himself as the best prepared person for the post of Prime Minister. But at the end of the day, the decision lies with the national population.
Mr. Young,
yes?
Allegations of inducements being offered by the UNC to buy voters. What are your thoughts on that?
I think they're more than allegations, but again, the PNM's way is not to delve into throwing accusations and allegations. I can tell you on my phone all day, it was very, very busy. We had legal teams in each constituency. I was following it very closely. And it was very disappointing, some of the behavior that can be attributed to other parties. And I'll just leave it at that. And one thing I'll ask Trinidad and Tobago, learn the lessons that need to be learned, because very often when people lead you down that garden path, it is very, very difficult to come back from that. And if that behavior that was described to me today, if only half of it is true, then I'm worried that that must never take root in Trinidad and Tobago. But we are not the sour grapes type. Thank you.
Would the recounts be considered in any seat? Is that kind of...
We don't. What we're doing here, we are conceding defeat globally. We do not have final figures for any constituency. We have some preliminary numbers that indicate that we've lost seats. We have seen trends that indicate that we are not likely to win those seats. We have some figures with some outstanding polling divisions to come in. We are sufficiently knowledgeable about those polling divisions historically to know that we will not be able to overcome the challenges ahead of us in the particular constituencies. So what we are doing here, we know that we have lost the election. But to tell you which seat and by what margin and which number, we can't do that now. In a matter of some hours, when the numbers come in from the EBC, those answers will come.
And Dr. Rowley, there's a perception that you went out on top when you resigned as Prime Minister. But now, the political party that you lead, they've lost this election. How do you think this loss will impact your time?
I have no time. My time has ended. The only thing I'm doing now is getting ready to hand over the political leadership.
But your time as political leader, how do you think this loss impacts it or affects it?
Well, when you contest, whether it is cricket, football, election, being second is a possibility. Somebody else could always win. That's why they call it a contest.
Dr. Rowley, do you wish that you had been a little bit more involved in terms of, going on the political platform more often with your successor?
No. I think I supported my colleagues. I didn't want to be overly involved, because you yourself would have been saying that I am in fact, how are you going to put it? You were going to say that I am...
Young is Rowley 2.0.
Yeah, you were going to be saying that Young had the crown, but I had the throne. That wasn't what I wanted. As a member of the party and as political leader, I came out in a measured way to provide support to the team, and I have no regrets about that, and I think I did as much as I could have done. And I didn't want to do any more because, frankly, I took myself out of the arena by resigning as Prime Minister and by indicating that I'm leaving as political leader. After 40 odd years, that was my decision, and I hope that you will accept it for what it is. Thank you all very much, and we enjoy the rest of the results, and we look forward to the new dawn tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have just heard the political leader of the People's National Movement talking about we've kept the faith, we've run the course. Stuart Young talking about, on principle, the PNM has come forward to concede defeat, not dragging the nation down the path of uncertainty. And Dr. Rowley would have been saying that the PNM is in the rebuilding business. And we spoke about a precedent a little earlier in terms of 1995 to 2010, 15 years. And 2015 to, well, 2010 to 2025, 15 years. But with that said, though, I want to go through and ask each of the panelists initial thoughts. Thank you. Dr. Basdeo.
I think Dr. Rowley has now hinted as the next major political hurdle the party will have to deal with in the next 24 hours. Let's look at it here. The party.
Okay, we ask you to keep that thought while we sort your mic, and we shift to you, please, Mr. Ross.
What's the question?
What are your initial thoughts?
On what specifically?
In terms of, one, the fact that the projected seats won, as well as what you've heard thus far in the concession.
Like I indicated just before we cut to the break, the trends were there. And I'm going to use the same analogy. You're in Form 1, 2, 3. Come in last in test. 2 years later, you need to pass those exams. What you going to do different? Take lessons? Apply yourself some more? You should recognize trends. And because we are a well-organized, well-structured party with internal polling and everything else, we know what the data says. And you cannot go against that data. Even if we look at the macro data and we just said, you know what? Let's not look at all the mini trends from Form 1 to Form 5. Let's look at, in 2020, we had 5 marginals. We won one of them. In 2020, they had 2 Tobago seats. In the general election, the opposition was gaining strength. And then we had a THA election, 7-7, and then we had a repeat, and we got blown out. That's not enough trend for you? And so that the lesson to learn here is, as people, we have to learn. There's this thing in the oil field that I came from called lessons learned. You go drill a well, you spend $40 million US, and during the drilling of that well, you have issues taking place, and you're listing all of them. And you're trying to figure out, if I had to drill this well again, what would I do differently to prevent that? And I mean, this is real time. In that business, that's what we did. And I expect, even in the political arena, in real time, whenever you run your polls and you see your issues, you rectify them. You listen to what they call the ground. What are the people saying? You go to your micro data, your local gov election results. You look at the THA results. It's telling you something. But sometimes we, me included, we sit, and I said this very early, in our own echo chamber. And because sometimes we surround ourselves with like-minded people, and they all are supportive of our party, we hear what we want to hear, and they all echoing the same thing, and some of them don't want to speak truth to power, so they tell you what you want to hear so that they would retain a position. But when we sit and we tell people, this is not the way I want to go, then we victimize people. And so we need, as a political party, to recognize when someone is speaking truth to power and saying to you, this is not the way, I would suggest that we do something different. And a real strong leader is one who will take on board those criticisms and use those criticisms to become a better leader, as opposed to being someone who's going to be bitter or carry feelings, so to speak. So there's a lot of lessons, I'm sure, to be learned as a party. And again, because of the organizational structure of the People's National Movement, hopefully those would get vented. And the beauty of being in opposition is at that point, you have nothing to lose. So all of them who are sitting down quiet, and I'm using all the colloquial expression I could use right now. I'm not trying to speak proper at this point. So all of them who are sitting down quiet and saying nothing, now is your time to speak up so that those lessons learned get recorded so that we don't have to repeat this weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth. That's what we ought to do. And I hope that the leadership is open to that type of dialogue and discourse. And I suspect that there will be, because now we are in opposition. And as the political leader said, we at one point came from 33 to 3 to where we are now. It's not as bad as it is back then, but it ain't good because it's win and second place. And right now we're in second place and we have 5 years to get back into first place. There's work to be done.
I appreciate what you said, Mr. Ross, on many levels. One of them is that you made those spaces between the lines for us to read rather easy. There's a saying, not everything good to eat, good to talk. And naturally, there'll be more that you know than you're sharing. But in terms of being able to speak to some of those things, and even like the analogy of exams, because one of the things that I keep looking at in my daily travels is the fact that, and I keep singing a stick fight love way too, examination tonight, woman. And I say that every time I see the puis blooming. And the puis, they have been blooming during this period. But we'll check your mic now, Dr. Basdeo, to see whether or not it's working. No, just speak and let's see if we can hear you on the mic.
Check one.
No. In terms of like your thoughts, thank you.
All right. Well, what I was saying is that Dr. Rowley raised a very interesting two issues constitutionally. Two constitutional issues. The first one, the PNM goes into opposition. But the PNM goes into opposition without a political leader. Dr. Rowley is the political leader outside of the parliament. So now, when he mentions Wednesday, it means now that the parliamentarians who have been elected will have to meet now to select a leader from among themselves. We can't say that if it is, it will be Mr. Young. Mr. Young carried the party into a defeat. He led the party into a defeat. That is accepted tonight. The question is, who will become, so it'll be interesting to be the fly on the wall when that meeting is held, as to who will be elected from among, because Dr. Rowley is putting out a figure of between 10 to 12 seats. If that is the case, then you're talking about a significant defeat on the part of the PNM. The second issue, which is more constitutional, it means that the UNC going into this, forming this government, will have a constitutional majority because they would have crossed the threshold required. So they will now have what you call a constitutional majority, which they can be able to initiate a number of changes that may have not been able to be done by the PNM 20 to 25 because of the lack of a constitutional majority. As again, we are left to see what the final figures are. So there are two issues that will have to be, because I think by Wednesday, the results should be sent to Excellency to make the necessary appointments by Wednesday. So the data from today is done and everything. So Dr. Rowley is playing the correct game, and that by Wednesday, the PNM will have to select or elect a new political leader.
I saw a lot of nodding from you, Dr. Harris. Your thoughts, thank you.
So I think that's one of the first things that struck me as well, and how the next few days unfolds for the People's National Movement. I think the party is strong and they will deal with it. And there's precedence because with in 1986 with Chambers, we also had we had 3 seats and no one was clear leader. So I think that will be sorted out internally. I guess I want to have more of a positive note on this, and I think we should all congratulate the PNM for declaring early and for giving the EBC the respect that it deserves as one of our institutions. And I think from my experience today, they conducted the election process very well, and they should be congratulated for that.
Thank you very much. And looking at because that was one of the questions I had to ask, and Mr. Rossi also spoke to moving forward. Looking at it through the gaze of a political animal, Dr. Basdeo, what are some of those optics that you are seeing in terms of during the 6 weeks and the build-up to having members who were from the UNC on the PNM platforms during the campaign? But even before, I'll let you ruminate on that answer, and actually I see other people nodding as well. But before that, we go to Carissa Douglas, who is, well, we actually have Ansel Dennis in Tobago. So I guess we will go to that at this point in time.
Actually, the two incoming members of parliament representing the Tobago People's Party, Mr. Joel Sampson of Tobago West and Mr. David Thomas for Tobago East. I also want to thank our two former members of parliament, Mrs. Shampa Kojo-Lewis of Tobago West and Mrs. Ayana Webster of Tobago East, for their distinct service to the people of Tobago and to the people of Trinidad and Tobago by extension. I think they have done a tremendous job representing the people of Tobago as part of a People's National Movement government that delivered to the people of this country and more specifically to the people of Tobago. We ran a good campaign, a short one, a 1-month campaign, where we advanced our track record to the people of Tobago. We explained to them our achievements, and we also gave good reasons for them to continue to have faith in the People's National Movement government going forward. Of course, our employers, the population, had other ideas, and they have spoken as a collective. And therefore the results, while we don't have the final results, we can safely say that the United National Congress will form the next government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. I wish to thank our campaign team. I wish to thank the executives of this party. Of course, I have here with me the chairman of the PNM Tobago Council, supported here as well by the minority leader in the Tobago House of Assembly, Assemblyman Kelvon Morris. And I wish to thank all of them for their continued service to this party and to the people of this island of Tobago. I also wish to thank our supporters, those who supported us during this campaign. And I want to indicate to them that as a party, this is not new to us. This is part of the political cycle where you win some and you lose some. This reminds me of 2010, and I want to indicate to our supporters that 5 years after 2010, the country was calling for the People's National Movement again. I wish the incoming government the best. I wish them success. I also wish our two new MPs representing us in the parliament soon, I wish them the very best as well. And we, of course, in the PNM, as we always do, we will go back, re-strategize, we will regroup, and we will definitely prepare for the next election, which is due very soon, the Tobago House of Assembly election. I also wish to thank outgoing Prime Ministers, Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley.
And from Tobago, we move directly to Merchant Searchan Road, where the leader of the United National Congress, Kamla Persad-Bissessar, is about to make a statement.
Good evening. Good night. UNC family and friends, I am very happy to join with you here at our party's headquarters. I ask you to join with me to first of all, let us say thanks and praise to Almighty God. When God says yes, nobody can say no. I want to thank our coalition partners joined with us for us to secure this victory. So can we give them a round of applause? United Coalition of Interests. And of course, I thank all of you, rank and file members of the UNC who have stood with me through thick and thin, through light and through darkness. You have carried me on a journey that was filled with love, with determination and resilience. I started off this campaign by saying, you will be the real heroes in this story. And I end this campaign saying the same, you are the real heroes in this story of Trinidad and Tobago. All of you, I cannot single out one or two or three. There have been so many thousands of you working in your zones, working in your sections. Today was really a great display of cooperation and of hard work where everyone stood in their zone and worked. Whether the seat was Superior, whether the seat was St. Joseph, whether it was Tunapuna, whichever seat it was, we had teams and teams of activists and people working every single seat. And so they did so well. All of you, thank you for showing up. Thank you for staying on the course and believing in our great party. Thank you, TNT. I say thank you for your support during this campaign. Thank you for your confidence for a better TNT. And for letting the world know that we, the people, have the real power in Trinidad and Tobago. We the people, you are the people, you are the government. Not the fake elites, not the financiers with all their money, but the real people of Trinbago who have toiled and kept faith that you deserve better. This victory is for the senior citizens to keep their pensions. This victory is for public servants to get their rightful salary increases. This victory is to reopen the Children's Hospital. This victory is to reopen Petrotrin. This victory is to once again give laptops to our children. This victory is to create over 50,000 jobs. And so, the victory is yours. Now that the UNC has won, everybody wins. We have fought a clean campaign. We have fought a campaign based on policies, plans, and programs. After years we spent listening to you and taking note of your wants, your needs, your hopes, and your desires. It is now that the real work starts. From day one, we'll be focused on delivering on our promises, working to make every citizen's life better, brighter, more prosperous. I give you the assurance tonight that no one will be left behind. No one will be left behind. Because when UNC wins, everybody wins. When UNC wins, Trinbago wins. Everybody wins. We will walk into government together. You will now have a Prime Minister who cares. A Prime Minister who loves you. A Prime Minister who will fight so that we all win together. We will work for you. You are the real bosses, and we are here to serve. Serve the people. Serve the people. Serve the people. You have an elected people-centered government for the people, by the people, and with the people. So permit me again to say thank you. Thank you. Let us rejoice and celebrate this day in our history. This has been a tremendous blessing. And once again, I thank you, Trinidad and Tobago. We will be with you every step of the way over the next 5 years and beyond. And I want to say tonight, and beyond, I want to say tonight to all our candidates who gave everything that they did, every muscle, every sinew they strained and worked so hard. Give it up for all our candidates of the UNC. Give it up for the candidates of the coalition of interests. And I say, get ready to win. It is time to win. Because now that the UNC did win, everybody wins. I have told you before, I have always told you, you have had leaders before me. You will have leaders after me. But I know you will never, ever have a leader who loves you as much as I do. May the good Lord continue to bless and keep each and every one of you. I thank you. Thank you. God bless.
So we're hearing the music of Robert Nesta Marley, One Love, from the stronghold or the headquarters of the United National Congress. And that one love possibly translates into the coalition of interest. And as we have had panelists speak to, what do you do from tomorrow? How do you start to move? What are your next movements? And before we even go into that, I want to ask, because there's a question I asked before we even went to Tobago and Mulchan Siochan. But even before we go there, Mr. Henry, what is your initial reaction, or even a little past that, because we've had two speeches, one of concession, one of victory?
Well, truly we can finally say the EBC carries out free and fair elections. And that in itself is something that, as a country, we can celebrate. It was very interesting that during the election process, many of the winners were saying the same thing, issues with EBC, issues and issues. So I think now as a country, and I hope as a responsible government, moving forward, that we really allow the sanctity of our independent institutions to do their work. And I also applaud the present Prime Minister of ensuring that we had election observers as well, as an added layer. Secondly, as I indicated before, this is an election on the margins. And I'm not just talking about margin on politics, but bringing in interest groups to move the margins in specific seats. It is true that the UNC base consistently holds. That's a historical fact. And even with the changes or dissatisfactions, let me say, for instance, you saw that you had young persons from executives resigning the day before from the UNC, the day before an election. We had the most historical resignations from executives from senior positions in a political party going into an election. And the incoming Prime Minister would have admitted upfront that the party was going through a purge. The question is, did this purge lead to a surge? We have received our answer. They have a constitutional majority. But one area I want to contend, and Dr. Abase will bear me out on this. This is not the first time that they've had a constitutional majority. The partnership in its formation would have held a constitutional majority, and they made no fundamental changes to the structure of the society, reform, or any advance movement. So this is Act 2, Scene 2. Would this occur? My question is, now the UNC has coalesced more power onto themselves. They do not have the COP as a third party that holds a seat. So then one would surmise that coming around a constitutional issue should be quite quick and quite prudent. That's yet to be seen. And then finally, I think we have to do politics much different and learn from the lessons. We talked about the exam. We talked about the PNM on the field and people campaigning. I alluded to it and I will explain this. The UNC is what the political data calls. They have mastered the art of what is called long-form canvassing. And long-form canvassing allows you to build relationships. Even when you are not in power, it allows you to still have sympathy with the electorate. So whilst you may have non-performing MPs who are in traditional UNC seats, who make no representation, who do not agree with bills that requires their support, their supporters still will support them because they're in their funeral, they're in their birthday event, they're in the barber shop. They master the art of long-form canvassing. I'm certain if they're in another place where discussions would be had, sometimes you hear people say, well, I deliver for my constituency. I may not see my MP, but I built A, B, or C. In a very small society, people value relationships and connectivity. Sometimes they simply want to be heard. So in a short-form campaign where we do power walks and plenty walks, and we walk, what I would have found in my research, many times, many of these MPs, they will go and sit with a family for 30, 40 minutes, just talking. No truck, no noise. Sometimes in some of these constituencies, for example, Claxton Bay, you wouldn't even see an active campaign, but there is active campaign going on. So I think that's a key lesson as the party looks to rebuild and to renew itself. How do you stay connected with people? And even when you're in government, you can't use the excuse of executive office that robs you of that time. And then finally, I would also say that I think as a society, we probably need to become a little mature of figuring out a solution. Probably this constitutional majority would allow us to figure out that solution of disaggregating those who operate in the central government, executive power, and those who do representative politics in terms of members of parliament, giving time to constituents and serving them.
And I'm going to take that as your wrap, Mr. Henry. I real vexed I'm not able to ask that question that I wanted to, but at the same time, let me ask for closing statements, please, gentlemen. Mr. Ross.
First of all, I want to congratulate the United National Congress in winning, in knowing what it takes to win. Because that's what this is about. When you go into an election, your job is to win. When you go to school, your job is to get them passes. All them other things you're doing in between school is whatever you're doing in between school. But they knew what it took to win, and they won. And the hope is that they would form a strong government, because a rising tide should be able to lift all boats. Whenever Trinidad wins, each individual in Trinidad should win. So all those Dragon gas deals, they now have to go to the table and fix those up, because that's where our revenue comes from. All the diversification, they've got to put that in place. So I'm happy that we've had, as usual, free and fair elections. I'm happy that the People's National Movement has also found it necessary to concede without creating any angst and blaming EBC and this and that and the other. And all I could hope for is for the tide to rise so that all the boats, and the boats being small boat, big boat, mom and pop, all the people in the country, all the people in the town, that they themselves would benefit from the government of Trinidad and Tobago.
Makes me feel as though you're hoping for a level of consistency with the tagline for that song that we've all been looking at.
That's not the song that I'm singing.
I hear that. Thank you very much, Dr. Bazdeo.
Well, it's very interesting to look at the campaign. It was a very short season, 5 weeks. And it's interesting to see the campaign that was mounted by the United National Congress. Coming out of over the weekend, all of the polls were projecting that the UNC would have won, but not at the margin that one is expected as we saw the results today. So the polls were saying, yes, they had a slim majority, but the result is you can see that the momentum is with them and that the tide was with them. So they're able now to actually emerge out of this election with the numbers. I guess we await the final figure from the EBC sometimes tomorrow to know the final figure. And then what we await now is the formation of the cabinet. I think that will be the next major event for the UNC, and the Prime Minister and Ms. Kamala Persad-Bissess are putting together a cabinet that will emerge out of these persons who have won the election. So you'll see a mixture of members of the Senate and members of the House of Representatives. So we await to see what that looks like.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. So we have seen the results of the elections. We've had a concession and a victory speech. The people have spoken. And for general election 2025, yellow is the code. This has been Race to 21 coverage of the general elections 2025 from TTT. On behalf of our panelists, Dr. Mukesh Bazdeo, Mr. Mwale Henry, Antonio Ross, and Dr. Jamelia Harris, on behalf of everyone who has been out, the crew, the journalists, bringing this information to you, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm DK Roster. Have a good night.
This is TTT. Live for local.
Morning to you, Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome inside the Now Morning Show. Today is Monday, the 28th day of April 2025. I'm Rokas. This morning, I'm alongside Natasha Lake. Good morning, Tash.
Good morning, Rokas.
It's election day, girl.
It is the day itself, yes.
How are you feeling this morning?
Well rested.
Good for you.
Yes, I know, a rare occasion in history, but you know what? It's 100% worth it. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. How are you feeling this morning?
Not well rested at all. I want to say good morning to Adna and Shane Cooper. They got married over the weekend.
Ooh.
We had a blast.
Yes.
I felt like I was working plenty for that wedding, but it was a great time, and it was beautiful to be able to be there to celebrate love, to celebrate togetherness, to celebrate the community that came together to celebrate them as well. So big up to the Coopers, congratulations. And also big up to the team that put on Jazz and Wine last night. It took place at Queen's Hall Garden Theatre.